A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. It was a crisp winter morning when my son and I arrived at the slopes, the air sharp and invigorating, promising a day filled with laughter and the thrill of gliding down glistening white hills. My son, Ethan, had only started skiing a couple of months prior but was already captivated by the sport. His enthusiasm was infectious. As a single parent, I cherished these moments spent together, feeling the weight of life melt away with each laugh as we bundled up against the cold. The excitement in his little voice as he beckoned me to a gentler slope warmed my heart. I watched him transform from a cautious beginner into a spirited skier. But as morning gave way to afternoon and we found ourselves at the base of a moderate hill, ready to take on a new challenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ethan, energized by the promise of adventure, shot off ahead of me, his red helmet bobbing in the distance while I followed cautiously, knowing that he needed space to explore but also keeping a watchful eye on his technique. That's when I saw him, a man with a smug expression and a bright orange ski jacket, barreling down the hill. I initially mistook him for simply a confident skier, but I soon realized he had little regard for those around him. As if determined to prove his prowess, he sidestepped Ethan's path as they met in a tumble of limbs and sharp edges. I felt my heart drop as I watched Ethan crumple to the snowy ground, a frightened look on his face. Before I could reach him, the man clumsily skidded to a stop, his attention unfocused as he turned to check his own gear rather than caring for the child he had just collided with. I rushed over, my heart racing, and knelt beside Ethan, my hands brushing against the cold snow as I surveyed him for injuries. Thankfully, he appeared unharmed, but the tears welling up in his eyes rattled me more than any physical ailment could. Anger simmered just beneath the surface as I glanced at the man, who was now sauntering away, clearly unconcerned about the aftermath of his recklessness. "Are you okay, buddy?" I asked Ethan gently, my voice trembling with a mix of relief and rising fury at the man's arrogance. Yet the sting of humiliation mingled with my protective instincts. Was it overreacting to call ski patrol on someone who had scared my child? As I comforted Ethan, I could see he was growing more distressed by the second, overwhelmed by the sudden chaos of the moment. I took a breath and made the call. While waiting for the patrol to arrive, I watched the man laugh and joke with his friends nearby as if Ethan's experience was an amusing side note. The urge to confront him was palpable, but fear held me back, wondering if turning this into a spectacle would only upset Ethan more. The ski patrol arrived relatively quickly, assessing the situation with calm professionalism while I explained what had happened and how the man had disappeared into the background of the day, leaving a ripple of anxiety in his wake. They assured me Ethan was safe and that they would handle the matter, which left me feeling both relieved and a little uncertain about whether I had crossed a line. After they dealt with the incident, Ethan and I decided to take a break, curling up at a nearby cabin with steaming mugs of hot cocoa. As we sat there, I watched him slowly return to his bubbly self, animatedly discussing how he wanted to tackle the next slope while I mentally sifted through my choices. Had I been too harsh? Did intervening really matter? The warmth of the drink settled over me as Ethan's laughter filled the air. My heart was still heavy, but the fuller sense of parental protection began to outweigh it. When we returned to the slopes, I kept him close, monitoring every wave of excitement or fear reflected on his face. The thought could not help but linger, should I have chosen a different route? The incident haunted me, a nagging feeling not just of vigilance but of questioning my decisions, stacking against the joy of our day. That evening, while tucking Ethan into bed, I finally asked him what he thought about the day, and he smiled brightly, recounting the delicious cocoa and the fun of trying out new runs. "Did you see how I turned my skis to avoid that giant snow bump?" he asked. Relief washed over me. Perhaps in the midst of chaos, our little adventures had forged lessons that neither of us would forget. Updates floated through my mind as I reflected on the afternoon, pondering about talking to someone at the lodge about safety for the kids but largely trusting that the ski patrol had taken appropriate action. The next morning, I sat idly, scrolling through a local social media forum when I stumbled upon a post titled something like AITA for being a reckless skier. The familiar orange jacket leapt off the screen. It was the man from the previous day, recounting the incident but portraying himself as a misunderstood thrill-seeker who had been wronged. I chuckled softly and felt a wave of empowerment wash over me, reinforcing that I did the right thing for my son. The story rolled through my mind as I sipped my coffee. Life was often a toss-up of what's right or wrong, but when it involved safeguarding my child, I knew I'd take the ski patrol every time. As I sat there, watching the steam rise from my mug, my thoughts danced between the warmth of the cafe and the icy chaos of yesterday's events. The mountain air clung to me still, its crispness a sharp reminder of that too-close encounter. My son, Jason, had been so excited to hit the slopes for the first time. The anticipation was evident in his wide-eyed, bouncing energy as we strapped on our skis, the bright sun glistening off the powdery white snow. I had watched him glide cautiously at first, a little awkward but admirable in his determination. I couldn't help but grin as he cautiously maneuvered between the ever-present shadows of seasoned skiers. That grin had faded quickly when the orange-clad man hurtled down the mountain like a rogue missile, his skis gleaming with reckless intentions. There was no slowing down, no effort to avoid my son, and the moment became a blur. I remember calling out, but my voice was swallowed by the wind as Jason was knocked off his feet, landing with an audible thud, his little body tumbling into a snowdrift. The panic that washed over me was paralyzing. I rushed to my boy, my heart hammering, unwilling to look away from the damage that could have been done. Thankfully, he just had a couple of bruises that would fade, but the feeling of fear lingered long after. As ski patrol whisked the man away, their disbelief mirrored my own. He was so enthralled by the thrill of skiing that he had overlooked his responsibility to other skiers. The disbelief turned into anger when I saw him posting about the incident online, morphing the narrative to paint himself as a victim instead of the man who had charged through a family day like a bull in a china shop. It made my blood boil, that arrogant dismissal of consequence. I pondered whether I was too quick to call ski patrol, but my internal mantra of protectiveness soothed my guilt. I had acted out of fierce love for my son. That night, I spoke to Jason about the importance of safety and respect on the slopes. He nodded, his bright spirit unscathed by the day's events. "Dad, he just didn't see me. I still want to ski," he declared, determination lining his young brow. A mixture of pride and fear twisted in my chest. A kind of courage blossomed in him that I deeply admired, even if it made my heart race with worry. As days passed, I kept peeking into the online forums where the orange jacket guy had been, watching him twist words to become a skiing legend when he was just a reckless distraction. Then, something shifted. The comments began taking a turn. More skiers echoed our experience, pointing out his reckless behavior and demanding accountability. It felt comforting to know that I wasn't alone in my assessment. The twisted perspectives attempting to absolve his actions had no traction. It seemed everyone else saw it as clearly as I had. I even gathered the courage to participate, sharing how his actions had endangered my son and that safety should always trump thrill-seeking thrills. Months later, as I skimmed through the old posts, I reached one that caught my eye. AITA for apologizing to a parent after reflecting on my reckless skiing? It was the same orange jacket, though this time the tone was remorseful. The author spoke candidly about self-reflection and growth since that fateful day. I couldn't help but shake my head, the past merging awkwardly with the present. Though it was gratifying to see someone take accountability, a part of me resented the years lost to careless decisions. I closed my laptop and turned my gaze into the depth of winter as it changed to dusk. Jason was at the window, captivated by the falling snow, his laughter a bright star amidst the swirling white. Perhaps life was less about the transgressions of others and more about how we chose to love and nurture, to build characters and let them shine. The glow in my son's eyes was enough to make me forget the orange jacket and all it represented. The love I held for him ignited my understanding that we all fall, we all learn, and sometimes we must confront the slopes for the world to truly thrive. As the evening settled in and the warmth of the fireplace flickered shadows on the walls, I found a sense of calm wrap around me, interlaced with the soothing sounds of the crackling logs. I watched Jason dance around the room, his little feet gliding over the polished wood like they had learned to ski themselves, each movement a testament to unbridled joy. It was in these quiet moments, away from the chaos of the ski slopes and the bitterness of confrontation, that I found clarity. The way he playfully mimicked the ski patrol with a makeshift rescue backboard, a cushion from the couch draped over his shoulders, made me smile. My heart warmed with the thought that the incident on the slopes, while harrowing, had embedded itself in a lesson of safety and respect that I hoped would shape Jason's adventures in the years to come. With a steaming mug of cocoa in hand, I settled into the couch, letting the aroma wrap around me like a cozy blanket. My phone vibrated, and I instinctively grabbed it, half expecting another distasteful rant from the orange-jacketed antagonist. Instead, it was a notification from Reddit. Jason's antics had drawn the attention of my post, a flurry of comments that ranged from supportive to downright accusatory. I chuckled softly, reminded of how the public realm could partition experiences so neatly into heroes and villains, spectator and participator. But as I read through the comments, a sense of community enveloped me. Many echoed my thoughts, recognizing that in the world of parenting, we don't always have time for gray areas. Suddenly, my musings were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. I glanced towards Jason, who had momentarily halted his playful theatrics, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. I opened the door to find Leah, our neighbor, with her 2 kids, bundled up against the cold. "We heard you had hot cocoa," she said, grinning widely. Her laughter melded with the sounds of snowfall, brightening our home even more. The kids rushed in, their cold cheeks rosy and eyes sparkling. Jason's laughter reignited as he pulled them into his playtime adventure, and the atmosphere shifted. In the midst of our newfound gathering, I realized that life's slopes could be treacherous, but they also gave rise to moments of incredible joy and connection. I welcomed Leah and her children, brewed fresh cocoa, and chuckled as they retold their ski adventures and mishaps. Each tale unfolded as gently as the snowflakes twirling outside, a reminder of how laughter and camaraderie could soften the sharp edges of an unfortunate day. As the night progressed, we worked together to build a fort with blankets and pillows, creating a sanctuary of laughter in our living room. I could see how these interactions knitted the fabric of community and camaraderie, and I forgot the weight of the perpetrator's orange jacket as I engaged with the now familiar chaos. Every fit of giggles, every slight mischief, and even the way the kids tossed snowballs wove a thread of warmth that contrasted against the chilly world outside, reminding me that while I had stood firm on the slopes, ensuring my son's safety, my real battle was here, fostering a space free of judgment and full of love. The evening dragged on, fading into night, with stories exchanged and cocoa cups emptied. Just as I was beginning to feel drowsy, my phone buzzed again. The thread on my earlier post had exploded with notifications. I glanced at the screen with fatigue but curiosity. More stories shared, sympathies and remembrances of their own cultish orange jacket encounters, and unexpected words of encouragement. One comment, in particular, struck me: "Every time you stand up for your child, the world gets a little bit brighter." I smiled, taking a deep breath. It felt like a love letter to every parent grappling with their role in protecting their children amidst the unforgiving terrain of the world. Settled back into the couch, I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of laughter swirl around me like the snow outside, enveloping me in a cocoon of warmth. I realized that we must all navigate our slopes, but what mattered more than the falls or daring escapes was how we choose to love, nurture, and advocate for those we hold dear. That night, as Jason drifted off to sleep surrounded by remnants of his excitement, I too surrendered to the calm of the moment, feeling reassured that each step I took for him was a step towards fostering resilience and strength, something I hoped would carry him even beyond the ski slopes. You know how some people say your in-laws can feel like an extension of your spouse, like a package deal? Well, if that's true, I found myself stuck with a pretty hefty shipping fee. My husband, Daniel, comes from a tight-knit family that abides by a tradition they've held for generations. Every Thanksgiving, they gather at his parents' home, all 25 of them crammed in like sardines, to whip up a homemade feast, complete with a turkey so large it could probably feed a small village. I used to love this chaotic spectacle when I first joined the family, but as the years went by, it felt less like a holiday and more like a pressure cooker. This year, I was at my wit's end. I had just finished a grueling work project that left me drained, my mind buzzed incessantly, and my anxiety clawed at my chest. The thought of spending an entire day amidst so many expectations made my stomach twist in knots. So, I had what I thought was a reasonable idea: let's skip the family Thanksgiving and celebrate just the two of us, a quiet dinner at home. I felt like I was offering a breath of fresh air, like we could actually connect without the cacophony of our extended family's loud conversations and constant interruptions. But when I brought it up to Daniel, you would have thought I'd suggested we cancel Christmas. His face fell, and within seconds, the warmth in his eyes vanished. "It's tradition," he said, his voice steady but edged with disappointment, as if I were trying to rob him of an important piece of his childhood. I could feel my heart sinking with each word, and the battle within me escalated. I knew how much this meant to him, a way to feel connected to his past, to his roots, but didn't my well-being come into play too? The days dragged on as I tried to convince myself that I wasn't being selfish. My phone buzzed with messages from his family, excited invitations layered with mouth-watering food photos. "We can't wait to see you," they enthused. Meanwhile, I sat alone in my thoughts, unnerved by the fact that my choice felt like a tug-of-war in my marriage. One night, I climbed into bed feeling a mixture of guilt and fervor. "Are you seriously not going to support me in this?" I confronted him, desperately searching for understanding. "You know how stressed I am." But the conversation only spiraled, and by the time we went to sleep, we hadn't resolved anything, drifting into our restless slumber with the weight of unsaid words pressing down on us. The morning of Thanksgiving arrived, and I found myself standing in our kitchen alone, staring down at a measly chicken breast and a box of stuffing I had half-heartedly set out, a stark contrast to any festive spread. I closed my eyes, trying to summon some sense of joy, but all I could see was Daniel in his parents' living room, laughing with everyone around him, while I'd sit here, the outlier. Was it really fair of me to take that away from him? But as I reached for the phone to send a last-minute text to his family, something made me pause. What if this was my chance to define our own traditions, to take ownership of our new family? So I decided right then and there, with the scent of why can't I cook wafting around me, to embrace the day ahead as it came. It wouldn't be what I'd envisioned, but it would be ours. Instead of spending the day sulking, I pulled on my apron, put on some music, and danced around the kitchen as if no one was watching. When Daniel returned home later that evening, looking a bit deflated but relieved, I greeted him with a plate of warmly roasted vegetables and a smile that masked my earlier worries. "I missed you," I said softly. And in the end, I realized traditions don't have to be rigid, they could bend and shift, just like the seasons. We may have skipped the family gathering, but maybe we were crafting our own new tradition, one rooted in understanding, love, and a whole lot of experimenting in the kitchen. Who knows, perhaps next year we'd figure out a way to combine both worlds. It felt like starting fresh, just the two of us. Update: it's been a few months since the Thanksgiving. Daniel and I talked things over, and he admitted he felt pressured to uphold traditions that sometimes felt more like burdens. We now have a mutual understanding to take turns with holidays, one year at home, the next with family. And honestly, I think adapting our own tradition ignited a renewed spark in our marriage. Turns out, cooking together isn't just an activity, it's our own rite of passage. As we settled into this new rhythm, the upcoming holiday season brought with it a sense of excitement that had been absent before. I could hardly wait to turn our small apartment into a cozy haven, filled with the scent of cinnamon and the sound of soft carols drifting through the air. It was our year to celebrate together, just the two of us, and I embraced the chance wholeheartedly. I spent days researching recipes that felt both festive and a little unique, like a spiced pear tart that I thought would be a surprise hit and an adventurous twist on mashed potatoes with garlic and herbs. Daniel was on board, which was a relief. He'd offered to take care of the turkey, turning our kitchen into a blend of his family's traditional preparation and my less conventional tweaks. The night before Thanksgiving, we went grocery shopping together. Our cart filled with fresh ingredients and maybe too many snacks. We even put on our own little competition to see who could make the most ridiculous culinary choice. I ended up with a bag of enormous marshmallows that I had no idea what to do with. "We can roast them on the fire pit," Daniel laughed, tossing them into the cart. It felt like we were kids again, exploring rather than just preparing. We headed home, and as the evening wound down, I could feel the warmth of the holiday wrapping around us. The next morning, as dawn painted our kitchen in soft golden light, we turned on our favorite music and commenced the cooking marathon. I can still picture Daniel, apron slightly askew, carefully basting the turkey while I danced around with my baking dish. He had such a focused determination, and I smiled to myself, thinking how much I loved this version of him, the one who made our holiday tradition his own, just as I was shifting mine. We set the table with the care of artists preparing a masterpiece. I lined our modest dining table with a simple white tablecloth, and we adorned it with candles and a small bouquet of autumn leaves. Each detail felt like a stitch in the fabric of our new tradition. But as we filled our plates with the food we had cooked together, a part of me remained anxious. What would my family think in just a few days when they came over for dessert? Would they accept this new direction we had taken? When my family arrived later that weekend, I poured all my nervous energy into being the perfect hostess, hoping that they would see the love beneath the different setup. Thankfully, they stepped in with warm hugs and familiar laughter that made my heart swell, easing the tension I had felt brewing at the back of my mind. I could see Daniel engaging with my family, joking about the turkey and exchanging culinary tips, and for a moment, I felt a rush of relief and excitement. Yet, as dessert time approached, my mom, hopeful as ever, leaned closer to me and said, "So, next year, we'll be back to the usual, right?" The question took me off guard, and I felt my stomach drop slightly. As I glanced at Daniel, who seemed equally uncomfortable, I realized I had to say something. "Actually, Mom, Daniel and I are hoping to keep alternating traditions each year. This is a new start for us, and we'd love your support," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There was a moment of silence, and my heart raced. I worried how my family would react, especially my mom, who cherished the comfort of our old ways. But instead, she nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression creeping onto her face. I see, well, that's wonderful, too. Traditions can change, but family stays the same. That felt like a turning point. It was like suddenly everything felt lighter. We spent the rest of the evening sharing tales of our own childhood holiday experiences. Daniel opened up about his sometimes overwhelming family traditions, and I shared my quirky childhood dishes. The thought that hit me was how our stories were powerful bridges, perfect for building new family traditions. As I lay in bed that night, with Daniel beside me, I reflected on the day. It wasn't just about the food or the holiday, it was about how sharing our worlds led to something richer. Together, we had transformed our uncertainties into laughter and warmth in a way I never thought possible. Fast forward a few weeks, while the world outside still breathed the remnants of autumn, our little home thrummed with the spirit of our own unique traditions, one dish at a time. Daniel and I started brainstorming even more ideas for the upcoming holiday season, asking each other about childhood memories and the experiences that defined us. It felt like we had a new plotline to explore in the story of our marriage, a blend of the old and the new where love was the consistent thread. This year, instead of a simple update, it felt more like a testament. Sometimes stepping away from tradition isn't stepping away from family. It's merely a beautiful way of welcoming them along for the ride into something fresh. Together, we forged ahead, ready to keep crafting our own path with all the warmth and resilience our hearts could muster. This was not just about a holiday, it was a celebration of us, and I couldn't wait for what was to come. As the leaves turned golden and the air began to carry the crisp bite of autumn, I could feel the excitement bubbling in my chest, a mixture of anticipation and a wee bit of nervousness. It was almost time for us to host our first Thanksgiving in our new tradition, the opportunity to showcase our blend of cultures and backgrounds with our closest friends and family. Daniel and I had charted out a whole new experience, merging his family's classic recipes with my own quirks. We developed a menu that made my mouth water just thinking about it: sweet potato casserole with a dash of cinnamon and a sprinkle of maple syrup, my mother's famous stuffing enriched with a touch of sage, and of course, his family's roast turkey, but I snuck in a smoky paprika twist. The kitchen was alive with the sound of sizzling pans and laughter as we rummaged through old family cookbooks and presented dishes to each other like treasured gifts. Each spoonful of gravy, every pie crust we wrestled with, became a symbol of our partnership. I remember the way Daniel would toss his head back with laughter, a hint of flour dusting his nose every time I challenged him on the proper way to fold in the whipped cream. Those little moments became our unbreakable thread, a tapestry of memories woven with joy, frustration, and affection. As Thanksgiving approached, however, I couldn't shake a lingering anxiety about how everyone would respond. Would my parents take to his family's traditions? Would his relatives embrace the deviations from the norm? The night before the big day, I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, mulling over my feelings as the weight of expectation settled upon my chest. It was more than just any family gathering, it was holding the potential for either acceptance or pushback. When the big day finally arrived, the air was thick with the smell of roasted turkey and fresh herbs, a heady mix that seemed to wrap around us like a warm embrace. Our small home was filled with love and laughter as guests trickled in, greeting each other with hugs and excited chatter. I caught momentary glances of worry on my parents' faces, but when I saw Daniel's Aunt Linda laughing heartily at a joke my dad had told, my heart eased slightly. Dinner was a beautiful disaster. Just as we all sat down to eat, the turkey, in all its glory, let loose a spray of juices, making Daniel and me erupt in giggles while our guests shot us amused glances. My mom offered a spoonful of real gravy while Daniel proudly served his paprika gravy, and I watched, holding my breath for the first bite. The moment felt electric. Much to my surprise, the two gravies aged like fine wine, drawing compliments from all corners of the table. Mixed conversations flowed over platters filled with vibrant colors, a mosaic of flavors that told stories of our families and their histories. As I watched my parents invest in Daniel's family's tales and traditions, my heart swelled. There we sat, weaving the old and the new into something that belonged to all of us, intertwined in understanding and affection rather than obligation. By the time dessert rolled around, I felt different, lighter, more alive. I looked across the table at Daniel, who caught my gaze and smiled, his eyes twinkling with a blend of pride and amusement at the embarrassing mishaps of the day. The evening ended with us all clinking our glasses, a chorus of gratitude ringing out as we celebrated not only the food but the promise of togetherness. The echo of laughter settled like a warm quilt draped over our shoulders, enfolding us in a newfound appreciation for life, each of us, together. As our guests began to leave, I joined Daniel by the door, quietly savoring the moment. It dawned on me that stepping away from rigid traditions opened doors I never knew existed. It wasn't about rejecting the past, it was about embracing possibilities, finding fresh beginnings even in the heart of cherished history. That night felt like more than just a holiday dinner, it was a collection of little miracles, each one reminding me that families can indeed forge ahead, carving paths anew while carrying legacies along for the ride. As we cleaned up together, Daniel leaned against the counter, a satisfied grin on his face. "Maybe Thanksgiving doesn't have to fit into a box," he said, brushing crumbs into the trash. "Maybe it just has to feel like home." And in that moment, surrounded by remnants of laughter and a shared future, I knew without a doubt that we were building our own journey, brick by brick, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I almost quit my job today, and it had nothing to do with the relentless paperwork or the beleaguered patients lined up outside the clinic. I'm a nurse practitioner, and my days usually blur together in an endless cycle of exams and prescriptions, but this day felt different, like the calm before a storm. I was looking forward to my afternoon shift, a solid block of time free from the morning rush, just me, the soothing hum of the fluorescent lights, and the comforting scent of antiseptic lingering in the air. That's when Lily walked in. She was around my age, maybe a bit younger, and her vibrant green hair was styled in a chaotic bun that seemed to echo her energy. I'd heard whispers of her around the clinic, the one with the unusual case. For someone who dealt with anxiety and depression, she managed to light up the dreary waiting room with her infectious grin, but it quickly faded when I called her name. There was something haunting lurking in the depths of her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands that didn't match her bright facade. As she settled into the examination room, the atmosphere shifted. I asked the usual questions, how she'd been feeling, any changes in medication, and why she sought help today. Instead of the typical responses, though, she began to tell me about the voices. They were quiet at first, just murmurs that danced at the edge of her hearing. But lately? They'd grown louder, insisting she was being watched by someone rather sinister. My heart sank into my stomach. HIPAA exists for a reason, protecting both patient privacy and our sanity, but as she continued, something tugged on my conscience. She said her family didn't believe her and, much worse, that they had given up on trying to help her. "It's as if they'd rather pretend I don't exist at all," she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't fathom the depth of that pain, the isolation. I could see the flicker of desperation in her eyes, the yearning for validation. I tried to reassure her, encouraging her to seek support from professionals who could offer therapy and possibly medication adjustments, but she insisted that wasn't enough. The voices had sharpened their focus, demanding she prove her existence in a way that threatened her well-being. I felt my heart race as her story unfolded, a pit forming deep within me. It was getting harder to maintain my professionalism. I knew I shouldn't share my thoughts, my personal experiences as a fellow human who'd felt unseen at times, but a voice in my mind urged me to try. Sometimes, the pressure of feeling invisible can become unbearable, I admitted, keeping my tone steady. But it's crucial to reach out to those who care for you. She hesitated, her expression riddled with conflicted emotions. "But what if I don't matter to anyone?" she whispered. For a moment, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Many people felt that way at some point, including myself. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to take her hand and reassure her that she mattered. But I couldn't, not without breaching that invisible line that kept patients and healthcare providers apart. I took a deep breath, the weight of the conversation settling heavily on my shoulders. As she left the room, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I was haunted by her words, her pain, and the burdens I couldn't ease for her. It felt wrong not to do more, to walk away and let someone so desperate wander alone into the world, especially with her fragile mental state. That night, I couldn't shake the experience, replaying her words over and over. I couldn't help but reflect on the strength of connection that often eludes us in our professional roles. I wondered if I had neglected that part of my oath, to care as a human as well as a practitioner. Maybe it was my own past experiences intertwined with her pain, but when I clocked in the next day, I resolved to change my approach. I wanted to find ways to connect my patients with support systems that made them feel valid, to foster a space where they could share openly. Perhaps I couldn't reach out in the fullest sense, but I could certainly lead them to resources that would prove that they mattered. As I worked on crafting a new referral brochure for mental wellness services within the clinic that day, I felt a sense of purpose pulsating within me. And in a way, through focusing on Lily's needs, I began healing some fragments of my own past. If nothing else, I hoped she would find a voice she could trust, a lifeline to bridge the gaps left by those who'd turned away. Months passed, and every so often, I would see Lily's name on the schedule. Each encounter felt like a new chapter. On one visit, I was pleased to see she looked better. The shadows under her eyes had lifted slightly, replaced by a flicker of hope in her voice. "You were right," she said, smiling as she unfolded the complexities of her therapy sessions and newfound support group. "I found my voice. And it turns out, I do matter." In that moment, a warmth spread through my chest, a confirmation that sometimes the smallest acts of reaching out can ignite a change profound enough to alter lives. Lily didn't have to bear her burdens alone anymore, and neither did I. I realized then that being a caregiver wasn't just about the prescriptions or the examinations. Sometimes, it was about sharing pieces of ourselves to help others stitch together their narratives, reminding them that they are not invisible nor expendable. In sharing our stories, we learn to redefine connections and uplift each other beyond the stigmas that might bind us. As I took in these thoughts, I glanced over at Lily, her apprehensive expression softening as she leaned back in the chair, visibly more at ease. The sterile white walls of my office, which usually echoed with the coldness of clinical detachment, seemed to blossom with warmth. There was something powerful unfolding between us, a shared vulnerability that felt like the roots of a plant intertwining beneath the surface, hidden yet vital. Somehow, this realization shifted something within me as well. I was no longer just a healthcare provider, I was both a listener and a participant in an unfolding human experience. However, the day grew darker as I remembered the nagging fears that had haunted me since I became a therapist. My mind wandered back to the unwritten rules of my profession. The protocols of HIPAA, with their stringent regulations, often loomed in the background like a shadow, reminding me that I must tread carefully lest I lose not only my career but also the trust of my patients. What if I stepped over a line with Lily? What if sharing even the slightest piece of my life led to a breach of confidentiality? I was supposed to be the one providing support, not dragging us both into murky waters where boundaries blurred. The anxiety gnawed at me, threading a mixture of elation and trepidation through my chest. To prevent the encroaching worries from spiraling, I redirected the conversation, asking her about her own experiences. A flicker of hesitation crossed her face before she divulged her first encounters with therapy. As she recounted her journey through various milestones, each wrought with its own struggles and victories, a sense of connection deepened. There was an innate comfort in the way our conversation flowed, a gentle give and take that felt as gratifying as it was cathartic. Every shared word knitted our beings closer together, yet in my quieter moments, the toll of my own thoughts lingered like a muted refrain in the background. As the session drew to a close, we exchanged pleasantries, but I sensed an unspoken bond tethered between us, stronger than the unyielding protocols of my profession. Lily had opened up in ways I never anticipated, allowing me to glimpse glorious vulnerabilities within her that reminded me of my own struggles, overwhelming at times, but profoundly human. I made a silent vow to find a way to navigate this connection without falling prey to my own fears. Perhaps, I thought, I could share selectively, using my own experiences to guide but remaining steadfast on the path of professionalism. In the following days, I immersed myself in my work, the rhythm of routine comforting yet occasionally disquieting. Yet, I couldn't shake the memory of that session with Lily. I found myself replaying our conversation over and over, marveling at how two souls braving their respective storms could find solace in shared vulnerabilities. With each passing moment, my initial fears surrounding that session diminished. I felt a resolve taking root. I wanted to work on my boundaries while still holding space for the humanity both Lily and I had uncovered. Finally, I decided that the best way to navigate this delicate situation was not in isolation but together. During our next session, I broached the topic with Lily, underlining the importance of our boundaries yet sharing that vulnerability had proven transformative for both of us. To my relief, she assured me she felt the same sense of community, the relief of companionship. Together, we forged a pact, to be honest about our boundaries while allowing our connections to flourish. The resolution felt simplistic yet significant. It was an unspoken agreement to uphold the integrity of our therapeutic space while celebrating the truth of our shared humanity. With each session that followed, I felt lighter, an odd sense of liberation tethered to my heart. Lily continued to open up in ways that astonished me, and I found myself drawn to her courage, the way she navigated her challenges with such simmering hope. The fear of HIPAA violations dulled in the face of the profound benefits of our connection. It became part of the backdrop of my practice, where I learned to delicately balance my role while still being present, authentic, and, most importantly, human. Reflecting now on that initial trepidation, I feel a newfound appreciation for the journey we've embarked upon, the uncharted waters of vulnerability and the cozy warmth that rises when care meets courage. Amidst the ethical intricacies of my profession, I've found that the essence of caregiving flourishes in honesty, resilience, and shared stories, cementing a beautiful, imperishable bond stretched across what once felt like walls of clinic and distance. After some time, I received a message from Lily. It was brief yet packed with gratitude, a simple, "thank you," expressing how our sessions felt less like a bandage on wounds but rather a seasoned balm for her spirit. I smiled as I read it, my heart lifting again at the thought that we both had navigated this path together, reminding me that sometimes, in the delicate dance of healing, the lines can blur in the most beautiful ways. Life was about bridging gaps, and our bond, though formed in a therapeutic context, had transformed into a cherished connection that I never could have forged alone. And so I realized, in the unpredictable landscape of being a caregiver, it is the humanity we share, the light and shadows, that helps us grow. As I reflected on that turning point between us, I found myself sitting in my small office, a cozy nook piled high with medical textbooks and framed reminders of why I chose this path in the first place. The walls, painted a calming shade of blue, felt more comforting than sterile as they witnessed the evolution of our relationship, a relationship I had once thought was strictly professional now unfolding into something rich and redemptive. I recalled the countless hours I spent with Lily, sifting through her complexities and the layers of stories she carried like old baggage. Each session had been a dance of vulnerability, her heart laid bare against the backdrop of my clinical paperwork and diagnostic goals. I had come to realize that through her own depths of despair, a flicker of resilience shone, and in turn, she was illuminating the way for me, a reminder of the intrinsic connection that binds us all as we navigate our personal labyrinths. But with joy comes uncertainty, and as thrilled as I was to forge this bond, I knew I had to tread carefully. There were boundaries to consider, ethics to uphold, particularly with someone whose path had been riddled with trauma and heartache. I pondered the intricacies of our conversations and wondered how I could continue to support her while avoiding the slippery slope of overreach. Amidst my thoughts, the reality was the challenging nature of navigating a caregiver's role, enhancing lives and offering insights without overstepping that invisible line, one that could easily blur. Soon, our next session arrived, a Wednesday that marked a full month since she had first come to see me. I prepared with mixed emotions, excitement stitched with the shadows of apprehension. As I entered the room, a familiar sight warmed my heart. Lily was already seated, her hands twirling a small silver locket, a talisman of sorts that had clearly become her anchor. "I've been thinking about what you said last time," she began, her voice steady, yet with a softness that carried an underlying vulnerability. "About sharing pieces of ourselves." Her words unfurled like blossoms in spring. Our conversation deepened and broadened in ways that felt profound yet so natural. She spoke of benevolent ghosts from her past, former friends who had fallen away, consumed by their own battles, and how their absence left scars she sometimes could not articulate. I listened intently, leaning forward, as time seemed to slip away like sand through fingers. What followed was a gentle volley of stories, her laughter sparking light moments, while the shadows of sorrow lurked just behind the edges, grounding her narrative. A part of me knew that I had to reveal a bit of my own past, a thread of vulnerability to encourage her narrative to grow. I shared tales of my early days in this field, moments of crippling self-doubt when my idealism collided with the stark realities of human pain. I spoke of patients whose stories had etched themselves into the tapestry of my soul, shaping my resolve and orientation. A fierce yet fragile connection blossomed in that exchange, making our struggles feel lighter, almost woven into each other's fabric of experience in a way that transcended clinical boundaries. As weeks drifted on, I felt us move through those uncharted waters, each session filled with dimensions that I had long ago yearned for in this profession, a partnership of healing in its purest form. I was filled with hope, camaraderie, and yet, a tinge of fear. It was the fear of losing her to the world's cruel indifference or the possibility of outing her vulnerabilities to another who would not understand. The emotional weight was palpable, but we thrived in our candid spaces, lifting each other. Sometimes I found it a bit too exhilarating and overwhelming, yet necessary. Then one day, it happened. Lily mentioned her desire to take a step further, exploring creative outlets to channel her feelings. She spoke of wanting to write a blog, to immortalize her battles and stir others who might feel lost. My heart raced, not out of fear, but sheer exhilaration at the thought of her blossoming beyond the confines of our sessions. Yet, the notion struck a dual chord. What if revealing those thoughts to the world puts you at risk? I hesitated. But she countered with a quiet steeliness that took me aback. "It's my story, and I deserve to tell it how I want." And she paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. It was a moment that whispered volumes, and I felt our roles reverse in that heartbeat. I began to see her not just as a patient in need of care, but as a beacon of strength, reaffirming that healing was a shared journey, bringing us back, full circle, to where we started, the necessity of weaving our lives together into something magnificent. With that revelation, I let go of my fears, recognizing that sometimes a pathway to healing lay in the raw honesty of our experiences. I embarked on encouraging her, offering my support and guidance while she traversed this new creative venture. As she crafted her first post, I felt a rush of gratitude. By helping her navigate the uncharted waters of sharing, I was also embracing my fears and reaffirming my purpose. In that light, I learned and grew right alongside her. And suddenly, the once stern lines of caregiver and patient blurred in the most beautiful, validating way. As days turned to weeks, I watched her transform into a confident storyteller, her words wrapping around other seekers of solace as if crafting a communal blanket in which they could huddle. The small canvas of our original therapeutic room became a vibrant tapestry stitched with lifelike colors reflecting joy and sorrow, laughter and tears. It drew others in, creating bonds of understanding and shared struggles. One day, while uploading her latest blog post, she reached out to me with dazzling excitement. A 2-minute read turned into an avalanche of uplifting responses. It was then that I began to fully grasp the magnitude of our connection. I felt closer to Lily than I had to anyone in a long time, and as the lines of our roles shifted, I found comfort in the dance we had created together. Then, as the seasons changed, so did our meetings. We held space together, celebrated milestones, and cried over setbacks, all part of a story that was still unfolding. Each session became a symphony of shared moments, navigating the unpredictable landscape together, replete with laughter, tears, and the beauty of newfound openness. With each step, I grew more certain in my belief that this journey was reciprocal. We were learners, healers, companions, and in the end, we were simply two souls forging ahead, one day at a time. As I look back on that journey, I remember it as a paradox, a blend of vulnerability wrapped in strength. I thought I would make Lily stronger, but in turn, she helped me reclaim parts of myself that I had buried under the weight of duty and expectation. In embracing her fragility while celebrating her resolve, I became entwined in the very essence of caregiving, a shared spirit where the act of healing became about all of us, far beyond the mere confines of an office. I never once regretted that I hadn't quit. Instead, I found a path not only for her but for myself, and this, I realized, was precisely what I was meant to do. Update: it's been 6 months since I last wrote this account, and I felt compelled to share a final chapter. Lily's blog had taken off. She was invited onto a platform to speak about her experiences, and through it all, her voice, our voice, has become a beacon for others struggling in shadows. Last week, we hosted a community gathering, bringing people together to share their stories face to face in a celebration of resilience. Something magical happened. In seeing the way our paths converged with others, I realized I wasn't just a caregiver, I was a part of something much larger than myself. We weren't alone anymore, and in stepping away from the boundaries I once feared, I learned that being human means opening ourselves up to the tapestry of lives we weave together, brightened by the stories we share. I never thought I would find myself in the midst of such chaos, but there I was, sitting on the edge of my bed before the door swung open and my best friend, Clara, rushed in, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and panic. It was a rainy Wednesday, the kind of day that makes you want to curl up with a book and forget the world outside, but today was different. Today marked 3 months since Clara's boyfriend, Ryan, had walked out, leaving her broken-hearted and desperate for answers that I had a sinking feeling she would never find. For years, I had stood by her through this tumultuous journey of love and heartache, but the truth was that I'd grown tired of her constant excuses, of the way she seemed to repeatedly brush aside her culpability in the relationship's unraveling to cling to her victim narrative. Ryan had been a good man, scrupulously faithful, but I'd watched the way Clara would flirt with him during parties, the subtle yet unmistakable invitations that would lead to late-night phone calls where she would complain about how distant he had become. I felt the weight of my own silence pressing down on me, which was why, on that rainy evening, when Clara burst into my room, I finally found the words I had been holding back for months. "Clara, can we talk?" I asked gently, hoping to soften the blow. As the words left my mouth, I felt a storm brewing within me. It was time to address the elephant in the room, no matter how much I dreaded what might unfold. Clara plopped herself onto my bed, a worn-out tear-streaked pillow held tightly against her chest as she anxiously ran her fingers through her tousled hair. "I just can't understand why he left, you know? I did everything for him," she lamented, her voice thick with helplessness. I looked into her eyes, swimming with confusion, and wondered how many times I had already fed her excuses, how many nights I had indulged her tales of woe without ever once saying what I really thought. "Maybe if you had just," I started, my voice betraying my hesitation, but she interrupted me with a wave of her hand. "What? If I had just what? Let him do whatever he wanted while I sat on the sidelines watching?" The accusation hung in the air like a heavy fog. It was then I understood I had to tread carefully. "Clara," I said slowly, choosing my words with as much care as I could. "I think if you hadn't always tried to get with him, maybe he wouldn't have left you." The moment the words spilled out, the tension crackled like electricity between us. Clara's expression morphed from hurt to outrage. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind as she struggled to process my blunt honesty. "How could you say that? You're my best friend. Aren't you supposed to support me?" I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a lingering urge to defend my stance. I reminded myself that friendship sometimes required uncomfortable truths, sometimes it meant risking the bond for something more substantial. "I am supporting you, but it feels like you've never truly seen how your actions have affected your relationships. It's not just about what Ryan did, it's about us taking accountability too." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken words. Clara's gaze fell to her lap, and for a moment, I thought I'd lost her for good. It was then she looked back up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. It was a look of vulnerability that I had rarely seen. "Maybe you're right," she whispered, almost too quietly to hear. "Maybe I need to reevaluate how I treat the people I love." I felt an unexpected relief wash over me. Often, the hardest conversations turn out to be the most necessary. We spent the rest of the evening talking in quiet tones, not eliminating the possibility of her feelings but rather exploring them, digging into the roots of her behavior. Each shared memory seemed to stitch us back together, slowly mending the cracks that had begun to spread between us. Weeks passed, and as Clara began to explore some of her choices in therapy, I too found myself reflecting on our friendship. It became clear to me that I hadn't only been a friend to Clara, I had also held onto her anger to shield my own insecurities. I called Ryan one evening, just to check in, and surprisingly, he was open to talking. He spoke about how difficult the breakup had been for him, acknowledging the tension between the three of us. It was strange to see another person's hurt mirrored in my own thoughts. After all, hadn't all of this stemmed from a place of miscommunication? Maybe we all had a part to play in this tangled web. In the end, our friendships deepened but morphed into something new. Clara found solace in a different place of strength, and Ryan began to explore his own journey of healing. And me? I learned that sometimes addressing uncomfortable truths is a pathway to a better understanding of ourselves and the relationships we value the most. Months later, when I invited Clara to talk again, I could tell we were two friends who had survived a storm together. "You know," she said with a wistful smile. "That was a real turning point, wasn't it?" I nodded, feeling the warmth between us, the shared strength formed through honesty and confrontation, a bond that, while bruised, had somehow been made stronger. And maybe, just maybe, we would find our way back to laughter and light, as friendships are prone to do. I sat with her in that quiet moment, reflecting on how rain often gives way to the sun. The experience wasn't just about blame or regret, it was a hard lesson in growth, empathy, and the importance of holding each other accountable as we navigate this unpredictable thing called love. The silence lingered, comfortable yet heavy, as we both processed everything that had been said. I glanced out the window, noticing the rain had finally ceased. It felt like a metaphor for our turbulent conversation, a storm that had passed, leaving behind a kind of clarity. "You know," I said softly, breaking the quiet, "you might not want to hear this, but part of me is glad this happened." Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion, and I quickly added, "Not because of the pain, but because it forced us to confront the things we usually sweep under the rug." She turned to me, her expression softening as she nodded, a hint of understanding dancing in her eyes. We were two souls tangled in a web of relationships, me, the one who had tried to help her see where her actions were leading, and her, the one who had, perhaps unknowingly, steered her life into choppy waters. We spoke for hours, delving into her relationship with Jake, her boyfriend, and the heartache that had been crippling her since he left. I listened as she recounted the moments that led to their unraveling, the desperation to feel wanted battling against the impulses that drove her to seek affirmation in places it didn't belong. Every time I thought about you and Tyler laughing together, it made me feel like I was missing something," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It was an admission filled with vulnerable honesty that echoed in the quiet of my living room, sinking into the spaces where judgment had dissolved. As our conversation unfolded, I realized that not only was I trying to disentangle her from her own thoughts, but perhaps also from my lingering resentment over how her actions had affected my life. Eventually, the air shifted from confrontation to appreciation, as she thanked me for pushing her to see the reality of her choices. "You saved me from myself, you know that?" she said, her voice laced with gratitude. I felt a surge of warmth at her acknowledgement, a soothing balm on the wounds that had formed from the conflict. "Sometimes you need someone to be honest with you, even if it stings," I replied, wishing she understood how difficult it had been for me to say the words I had spoken. The evening wore on, and with every moment we shared, the shadows of our past began to recede, illuminating the path before us. On a whim, I suggested we consider starting a book club together, something that had been a long-standing joke between us. The idea was met with a laugh, and just like that, we transitioned from heavy-hearted discussions to playful banter about what books we might choose. It was a brilliant revelation, the whimsical notion of stories to share and discuss drawing us back into the familiar rhythm of our friendship, leaving our deeper troubles behind, if only for a moment. As the night wore on, I felt the worry of aftermath slowly lift, maybe the storm had truly passed. I turned off the lights, wrapping us both in the cozy familiarity of warm blankets and the faint scent of chamomile tea wafting through the air. It was in those shared breaths, wrapped in comfort, laughter, and the reverberating echoes of our goodbyes to hurt, that I finally dared to hope. Perhaps building back our friendship wouldn't just be a chore, but an adventure, one step at a time. After all, every story of conflict can lead to new beginnings. When I later wrote my post on the AITA thread, I framed it not just around the tumult of those moments but also around the evolution of our bond. It truly is a testament to how love, in all its forms, can ultimately rise from the very ashes of pain. And as I hit submit, I felt a wave of catharsis wash over me, a sense of closure for what had been. The comments that followed, filled with support and shared stories, became a living testament to the resilience of relationships, no matter how strained they may become. Hours later, as I finally drifted off to sleep, I clung to the thought that even the heaviest rainstorms make way for the brightest dawns, and perhaps this new dawn was the beginning of something beautiful for both of us. As I slipped into the soft embrace of sleep, my mind swirled with hopeful visions of the days to come, where laughter would find its way back into our conversations and the lingering shadows of doubt would fade into a distant memory. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, casting delicate patterns on the floor, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I awoke with a sense of peace that seemed to linger just outside my consciousness, waiting to be acknowledged. I reached for my phone, half expecting a cascade of notifications, but found only a solitary message from Sarah, my best friend. It read simply, "Can we talk?" I could sense the apprehension in those 3 words, a quiet echo of all the unsaid apologies hanging between us. While I was eager to engage, I also felt a tightening in my chest at the thought of another difficult conversation. What would I say? Did I even know how to approach it? Taking a deep breath, I replied with a tentative, "Of course, when and where?" We decided to meet at our favorite cafe, a small, cozy place adorned with whimsical decor and the intoxicating aroma of fresh pastries. Arriving a bit early, I perched on a low stool, my heart thudding in anticipation of what would unfold. When she walked in, she appeared almost ethereal, the sunlight catching the strands of her hair, framing her face like a soft halo. Yet, beneath that radiant exterior, I recognized the shadows of uncertainty etched in her expression. She slid into the seat across from me, and we exchanged hesitant smiles, as if testing the waters after a storm. "I'm really sorry," Sarah began, her voice shaky but sincere. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how selfish I was, and I don't know how I let it get that far." I wanted to jump in, to assure her that we would be okay, but something inside urged me to let her voice her feelings first. "So," I nodded, prompting her to continue. "It's just. I guess I wanted what you had, without realizing the toll it would take on our friendship." "I know I hurt you," she said, her eyes glistening. There was pain in her words, a raw honesty that cut through the layers of our past. I felt something within me soften as I listened. It dawned on me just how much she had been struggling with her insecurities, having always looked up to the love I shared with my husband. "You were caught in a fantasy, just as I was," I replied softly. "It's hard to separate our desires from reality, and trust me, I've had my fair share of doubts." I thought things would always be perfect, but things change. We talked for hours, layers of misunderstanding peeled away like the soft petals of a spring blossom, revealing the roots of our friendship still intact beneath the surface. It felt refreshing to vent, to listen, and to empathize as we shared our past victories and losses, reinforcing how we had each found ourselves longing for something we had overlooked, the prioritization of our friendship over fleeting moments of jealousy or neglect. As time slipped by, I felt a sense of healing course through me. It wasn't just about reconciling our pasts but also about understanding the deeper roots of our connection. By the time we reached the end of our coffee, I felt as if we had created a new layer in our bond, more resilient than before. So, what now? I asked as we gathered our things, feeling light. I think we should take it slow, just focus on being us again, she mused. Let's just hang out, like we used to without any complications. I grinned, surprised at the weight that had lifted between us. We had learned a hard lesson together, one I hoped would keep us stronger and more connected moving forward. In the days that followed, we slowly began to rebuild our friendship. We went for runs by the river, where we laughed until our sides hurt, cooking together on the weekends, and even picking out movies to binge on lazy afternoons. Each gathering felt therapeutic, stitching together the frayed edges of our lives. I also saw how she began to take a step back from seeking validation in the attention of others and focused more on nourishing her self-worth. It was inspiring, and I felt grateful to witness her growth. Pain, it turned out, was not the end of our journeys but merely a pit stop on the way to something extraordinary. And with each passing day, the sunlight grew brighter, reminding me of how our lives could soften and reshape after a heavy rainstorm. As for my marriage, that too started to flourish. My husband had come to understand the weight of the situation, and we worked on cultivating stronger communication, prioritizing our bond in a way that honored its foundation. Perhaps we were all just learning how to navigate the complexities of love, friendship, and desire, an ongoing journey where every misstep could lead to enlightening perspectives. The day came when I found myself pouring out my heart again in another Reddit post, this time sharing the beautiful progress we had made, casting a brighter light on the lessons of accountability and unconditional support. We're all flawed, I wrote, but embracing each other's flaws can lead to something even more beautiful. It was cathartic, feeling the words tumble out freely, no longer burdened by resentment but buoyed by hope. As I hit submit, I looked out the window at the dawn breaking over the horizon, the colors blending seamlessly together, and for a moment, it felt like I was standing at the brink of an adventure, one built on healing and sincerity. What followed was a stream of encouraging comments and heartfelt messages from fellow Redditors who had experienced their own journeys of reconciliation, and they reminded me that the most difficult paths can lead to unexpected destinations, the small moments of joy, the laughter shared over coffee, and the deepening of true friendship. Just as I had hoped, the rain had brought forth a new dawn, and now, with each gentle wave of connection that rolled in, I understood that sometimes, the darkest storms create the most stunning landscapes. I spent most of my childhood in a bubble of solitude, and as I look back now, those years feel like a different world altogether. Growing up an only child in a quiet suburban neighborhood meant that my days often floated by with just me, my thoughts, and a few loyal companions in the form of imaginary friends. It wasn't until I was in high school that I really began to notice how different I was from the other kids. While they raved about sibling rivalries and shared birthday parties, I mostly had memories of building elaborate blanket forts alone or losing myself in vast, fantastical stories spun from my overactive imagination. It felt almost like a badge of honor, until it didn't. When I met Sarah, my first real friend, in the spring of junior year, things shifted. She was boisterous and full of life, the kind of person who could spark laughter in the dullest of moments. One crisp afternoon, as we were lounging on the grass after school, she turned to me with an amused look and asked, "So, what's it like being an only child?" My cheeks flushed. I had never really thought about it before, never really questioned how it might look to others. I shrugged and joked, "I'm basically a lone wolf, thriving in my solitude, hoping my nonchalance covered my discomfort." But as our friendship deepened, I realized this perception became a topic of curious discussion. To Sarah and our circle of friends, I was the odd one out, and eventually, they began to label all my little quirks, my need for silence, my aversion to crowded places, my compulsive organizing. They teased me gently, asking if I ever felt like I was missing out on something vital by growing up without siblings, weaving a narrative that sent little ripples of discomfort through my chest. I started to examine my world more critically. Anxiety tugged at the corners of my mind like a persistent shadow. Was I really missing out? Had my quiet upbringing somehow stunted my capacity for connection? Those thoughts spiraled in me, building a tension I couldn't shake. In a moment of vulnerability, I admitted my fears about not fitting in to Sarah one day during lunch. I braced for reassurance, but all she gave me was a confused look. "It's not that serious," she said lightly, picking at her salad. "Being an only child just means you didn't have to learn how to share." It was said in jest, but the laughter that followed hung uncomfortably in the air, like the awkward silence that often enveloped me at family gatherings. The words replayed in my mind, a constant reminder of the perceived limitations my upbringing carried. It wasn't until weeks later, during a late-night conversation filled with soft whispers and secrets, that I found clarity. As the stars twinkled outside Sarah's window, we spoke about dreams, fears, and the silent battles we all faced. It was then that I realized being an only child didn't frame me in a box, it simply added to the collage of who I was becoming. I had learned independence in a way that others hadn't. I had cultivated a rich inner life that allowed me to empathize deeply, to share pieces of myself that were raw and real. By the time summer rolled around, I began to embrace my differences. I no longer felt stifled by the perception of what an only child meant. Instead, I wore it as a unique element of my identity. The teasing from friends became affectionate ribbing rather than painful reminders, and I found joy in explaining my quirks to new people I met. It was silly, almost freeing, to clarify things like my peculiar love for quiet coffee shops or my habit of organizing my bookshelves by color, little nuances that made me, me. In some ways, I imagine that everyone had their own singularities, and mine were simply born from a different start. Maybe they reinforced my strengths instead of my weaknesses. I think back on that time fondly, remembering how it shaped my adult relationships. Connecting with others became a deliberate act, a choice to share my thoughts and feelings instead of hiding behind them. I discovered that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness but an invitation to deeper connections. The laughter shifted, it turned from gentle teasing to understanding camaraderie, and instead of seeing me as the solitary figure, my friends began to see the depth of my inner world. And now, as I share this story, I recognize that each uniqueness tells a larger narrative, the stories we all carry through life, boundlessly weaving with those around us. Even now, I sometimes yearn for that comforting solitude of my childhood, the solace of quiet reflection, but it was ultimately the connections I forged that opened the door to understanding myself better. It turns out, growing up alone in a crowded world taught me how to truly relate to others, to appreciate the vibrant tapestry of human experience that connects us all, and I've learned that it's not always about sharing a childhood, sometimes, it's about sharing a journey. And as for Sarah? Well, she's still my best friend, and we often reminisce about those carefree days, realizing how those silly conversations about sibling relationships sparked something profound in both of us. Update: a few months later, I saw a post on social media by Sarah asking, "What's something you learned about yourself that surprised you?" I responded, "Being an only child taught me more about connection than I ever realized." It received many comments, and people shared their own stories, forming a rich conversation. I couldn't help but smile at how the thread weaves together our different experiences into one collective narrative. Scrolling through the comments on that post, I felt a warmth swell in my chest, realizing how deeply our experiences intertwined. Each reply was a unique thread in the tapestry of human connection, beautifully illustrating how our diverse backgrounds shaped us in myriad ways. It was there, beneath the haze of glowing screens, that I caught a glimpse of a broader truth. My life had been influenced by an apparent isolation, growing up without siblings, which now seemed to blossom into an empathetic understanding of others seeking connection. Sarah and I had often joked about the quirks I exhibited, my compulsive need to organize things, my tendency to take up a lot of the conversational space, and my sometimes awkward attempts at humor that felt like they needed an audience. Yet these traits didn't just define me, they had formed bridges to my friends, especially to her. As if she sensed my wandering thoughts, Sarah texted me later that evening, "Let's grab coffee tomorrow. I feel like we both have a lot to share." Over lattes and warm croissants, we picked up right where our shared online discussions left off, transforming abstract experiences into tangible conversations loaded with laughter and revelations. Our familiarity felt like a blanket on a cold night, comforting and secure. Seeing Sarah's animated gestures as she recounted her own misadventures of self-discovery made me realize how different yet similar our paths were. She spoke of the chaos of growing up with siblings, how they often bickered yet remained inseparable, a bond forged in the fires of familial dynamics. There was an enviable freedom in her siblings' ability to spar over petty things until a simple moment of laughter could dissolve the tension in mere seconds. In our conversations, I often considered how my solitude had cultivated independence in me, yet I could feel this quiet yearning for kinship that had simmered below the surface, nurturing my desire for connection in unexpected ways. It became clear that while we had grown up in different settings, the quest for belonging was fundamentally universal. Toward the end of our coffee date, as we sipped the last dregs of our drinks, Sarah posed a question that seemed innocuous but struck a deep chord within me. Do you think being an only child opened or closed doors for you? I paused, stirring the remnants of milk in my cup, searching for the right words. Both, I think. It's opened doors to understanding and appreciating the depth of relationships, but sometimes I wonder if it also closed off the type of spontaneity that siblings provide. Her eyes lit with understanding. I get that. It's like we took two different paths through the same woods. Driving home, the afternoon sun dipped low, casting a golden glow through the trees, swirling leaves dancing in the air. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My heart swelled, no longer tethered by the solitude of my upbringing but buoyed by the connections I had forged in adulthood, the friends who accepted me for all my quirks. Reflecting on that coffee date, I realized it wasn't just about siblings or being an only child, it was about embracing the uniqueness of our individual journeys while recognizing a shared goal of longing to belong. Curiously, I decided to update my original response on Sarah's post with this realization, as I sensed it would resonate with others as well. It's funny, isn't it? I wrote, how our upbringings mold us, but we realize the essence of connection lies in understanding ourselves and each other, regardless of whether we grew up alone or surrounded by siblings. As the notifications buzzed in, echoing my sentiments back at me, I could almost feel the community's collective warmth enveloping me, reminding me that whether we came from large families or were raised in the quiet corners of solitude, we each held a crucial part of the puzzle that formed our shared humanity. The realization dawned on me, the connections might just be the threads that bind us all, stitching together a narrative richer than our individual stories alone ever could, and perhaps in that, I found my own peace, nestled comfortably in a world that felt just a little bit more connected. That evening, as I put away my phone and took a moment to sit in the cozy glow of my living room, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had always loved the silence of my childhood home, filled only with my thoughts, the pages of a book turning, and the occasional laughter between my parents, a serene bubble of love and warmth that sheltered me from the outside world. But now, I found myself marveling at how that quiet solitude had not limited my ability to connect, rather, it had nurtured a deep sense of empathy within me, one that allowed me to reach out and bridge the vastness that sometimes felt so isolating. The conversations we shared in the comment thread, that digital tapestry, reminded me of my late-night talks with Sarah, the way we dissected life's little intricacies and laughed over the absurdities we encountered. Sarah had sent me a message earlier that afternoon, suggesting we grab coffee soon to catch up, and I felt a flutter of excitement at the thought. I remembered a time when I might have hesitated, concerned that my world of one had somehow stifled my ability to engage, but not now. I wanted that connection, craved it even, like wildflowers stretching toward the sun. The next day was warm and inviting, and as I walked into the charming cafe where we had agreed to meet, I could already see her through the window, her animated hand softly punctuating her words as she spoke to someone behind the counter. It struck me then, how much she had become a part of my narrative, her own stories, filled with the noise of siblings and family dinners, weaving seamlessly into the quiet moments I had grown so accustomed to. We hugged tightly when we finally met, a rush of warmth reminding me that these moments were what I had been missing. We found a nook in the corner, the scent of freshly brewed coffee surrounding us like a comforting blanket. As we settled in, I couldn't help but reflect on the beauty of our friendship. It was a blend of her boisterous tales, filled with the chaos of siblings, balancing the stillness of my own upbringing. Our discussions flowed effortlessly, touching upon everything from our childhood moments to the recent posts we had engaged with on social media, each revelation feeling like a gentle shift in the pieces of a puzzle that was finally fitting together. As Sarah went on about her younger brother's latest antics, a sense of peace washed over me. Listening to her laugh, her eyes sparkling with details, I felt an undeniable bond forming, one that was neither defined by the number of siblings we had nor the homes we grew up in, but rather by our willingness to be present, to engage with one another's worlds. It was an understanding that transcended our physical realities and all the little insecurities that came with them. We talked about our careers, our dreams, and even our fears. I shared how I had often worried about being perceived as self-centered or introverted, but Sarah's response was a grounding reminder that traits were merely facets in a spectrum of our personalities, and it was how we chose to navigate the world that truly defined us. Later that week, sparked by our conversation, I decided to share my experience with solitude and connection on my social media. I posted a reflective piece about how growing up without siblings taught me the art of nurturing and craving connection in a world that often felt distant. To my surprise, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. It was as if I had pulled the thread of vulnerability, and suddenly, everyone was weaving their own stories into mine. Those with siblings spoke of how they valued their relationships, while others shared the struggles of being an only child, echoing similar sentiments to what I had experienced. Each comment felt like a gentle tug at the fabric of our shared reality, a tapestry of laughter, tears, and understanding. By the end of the week, the post had sparked long threads of conversations, bringing together a community of voices, tales of connection and solitude simmering in the warm glow of shared empathy. As I tucked myself in bed that night, I reflected on how remarkable it was that our seemingly separate lives had the potential to intertwine, drawing us closer as we sought deeper connections. I felt a new chapter opening in my life, one where I could embrace both the quiet spaces I cherished and the vibrant voices of others. Perhaps this was the true gift of growing up as an only child. It didn't isolate me, it prepared me to appreciate the beauty of human connection in all its forms. Maybe, just maybe, the absence of siblings had equipped me with the ability to cultivate friendships that were, in their own right, as close as family. And with that comforting thought, I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the conversations yet to be had, and the threads of connection yet to be woven in the intricate tapestry of life. It all started on a rainy Thursday when I found myself staring at my phone, contemplating whether I should answer the call from Jamie. Jamie and I had been best friends since childhood, our lives woven together like the strands of an old tapestry. He was the kind of person who wore his heart on his sleeve, and while I admired him for that, it often led to the kind of emotional labors that I sometimes felt ill-prepared to navigate. The thing is, I owed him $60 from a bet we placed 3 months prior. At the time, it felt like a good idea. He had bet I wouldn't see a specific movie in theaters, a kind of absurd challenge we often entertained to pass the time. I had pulled through and watched it, laughing at how easily I'd won. But life had a funny way of making one's priorities feel scattered, and with each passing month, that small debt lingered in the back of my mind, like a familiar yet annoying itch I couldn't quite reach. As I sat on my couch, the rain beating against the window, I felt an odd sense of dread. Jamie had been talking about his financial struggles lately, how his part-time job didn't cover his rent or his bills, and I could feel the weight of that call pressing against my chest. I hesitated for a moment, finally picking up the phone, but the conversation wasn't what I anticipated. Instead of the usual banter, Jamie launched into a heartfelt rant about how he felt completely overwhelmed by the world. It was like listening to a dam break, all his frustrations flowing out as he told me about the suffocating weight of his responsibilities. As he spoke, I felt my stomach twist into knots. How could I ask him to let go of this trivial debt when he was clearly in pain? "Look, Jamie, I just need to say something," I interrupted hesitantly. "I know I owe you that $60, but with everything going on, can we just let it slide for now?" I could hear the silence on the other end, how the weight of my words sank into the atmosphere, and I could almost picture his brow furrowing in contemplation. Finally, he spoke, and there was a tremor in his voice. "You know, I really need that money, though." My heart sank deeper. I wanted to help him, but the truth was, my own finances weren't exactly stable. It felt selfish to hold on to my money, but asking him for patience felt equally wrong. Days turned into weeks, and our conversation echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. I could see Jamie's disappointment flash across my memory, see the disbelief etched into his features, and the burden of guilt settled firmly on my shoulders. I tried to reach out, perhaps offering to treat him to coffee or something small to remind him that I cared, but our meetings became fewer as he threw himself into extra shifts. Just as I was spiraling into my own feelings of guilt, Jamie reached out once more, but this time, there was an edge to his voice that set me on alert. He wanted to meet up, and with that, I felt a sense of impending doom settle over me. Did he want to discuss the money again, or was there something else brewing beneath the surface? The anxiety was palpable inside me. It was almost a physical thing, weighing heavy on my chest as I approached the cafe we frequented. When I arrived, he was already seated at our usual table, fidgeting with his phone, looking tangled up in thought. I slid into the seat and gave him a small smile, which he returned with a nod that seemed devoid of any real warmth. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," he began, his voice steady but lacking its usual enthusiasm. "That money. It's not just about the money for me. It feels like a lack of respect, like you don't value our friendship." The words hit me like a slap, and I felt my chest constrict with shame. I just thought, I started to defend myself, but I could hear the raw hurt in his voice, and my mind raced to find the right words that wouldn't sound like empty excuses. I thought maybe since things were hard for you, we could let it slide. His gaze was piercing, and I could almost see the crumbling pieces of our history floating between us. The conversations we used to have, the laughter we shared, now felt grim and fragile, like the remnants of a dream slipping away. But it's not just about the money, it's the principle, he pressed, emotion layered in each word. I could sense the anger rising, and a part of me wanted to retreat, but I owed it to both of us to engage. Jamie, it's not that I don't care or value you. I'm trying to navigate my own life too. What if I'm struggling in my own way, just like you? The moment hung heavy, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his armor begin to show. I didn't realize you felt that way, he admitted, his voice low, the fight momentum suddenly dulled. I could see the realization wash over him, just as much as it flooded me. Perhaps I wasn't the only one struggling with insecurities masked as arrogance. In the days that followed, we both took a step back, breathing in the unease of our friendship and beginning to stitch it back together with more understanding. I did pay him back the $60. I realized that money was only one part of the equation. What mattered more was the open dialogue we finally had, the clarity that settled between us, allowing both our vulnerabilities to emerge. This experience transformed our friendship. It was no longer about the money but about feeling seen and valued. An update in my mind now gleefully whispered to me, I learned that competitions between friends can lead to both friction and an unexpected depth in connection. Looking back, that seemingly trivial debt acted like a guidepost, leading me to confront not just my financial responsibilities, but my emotional ones too. It became a lesson in empathy and respect, a reminder that true friendship treasures open-hearted conversations over mere transactions. And those rainy Thursdays? They aren't so dreary anymore, as they've become. Reminders of our renewed bond, strengthened through vulnerability, reminding me every day that sometimes, it's worth diving deeper to find the light. As I settled into my routine, the mundanity of each rainy Thursday transformed into a ritual of sorts. Each week, I would sit on my porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, as the rain drizzled on the roof above, creating a comforting soundtrack of muted rain patters and distant thunder rumbles. The street, with its slick, glistening pavement, took on a different hue. Each drop of water seemed to wash away not just the grime of the day but also the tension that had once hovered between James and me. I would think back to that moment when I looked him in the eyes and saw the hurt festering beneath the surface, beneath our laughter and easy banter, like an unresolved question lurking in the shadows. It was in this quiet space of reflection that I learned the importance of humility and accountability, both to myself and to those closest to me. I never forgot that debt, the $60 that, at one point, felt insurmountable, almost like a millstone around my neck. Yet that very symbol of conflict became a mirror, prompting a deeper inquiry into how I navigated my relationships. James and I began to spend more time together, engaging in long talks that seemed endless under the canopy of evening stars or the dim, warm glow of a dimmed living room. We would play board games, dive into old movies, and explore our small town's hidden gems, often with laughter trailing behind us like a kite on a gentle breeze. Those moments drew out a connection I hadn't known we'd lacked before. Conversations became more meaningful, filled with genuine inquiries into each other's lives, worries, and dreams. There was a palpable shift. The unspoken tension was replaced with a camaraderie built on shared experiences and vulnerability. No longer did I feel the burden of that $60. Instead, it served as the catalyst for deeper exchanges. One particularly rainy Thursday, as we sipped our drinks and watched the clouds roll in, I opened up. You know, I used to think friendship was just about hanging out and having fun, James. But I realize now it's about the tough stuff too, like debts and misunderstandings. I really appreciate how we've navigated through all of that. It brought us closer. He nodded, looking pensive, and then he smiled softly. I have to admit, I felt awkward about it, too. It wasn't just the money, it was what it represented. I don't want to feel like I'm holding something over you when all I really want is your company. The honesty hung in the air, wrapping around us like the comforting embrace of the warm sweaters we wore. I chuckled at the absurdity of how a financial transaction had morphed into a vehicle for deeper understanding. James reached for his phone, and with a twinkle in his eye, he pulled up a meme that perfectly encapsulated our journey, and we erupted into laughter, once again transported to a place where our bond felt effortless. That evening, the rain intensified, pounding against windows like a drum, but instead of keeping us boxed in, it felt liberating, an orchestra accompanying our newfound harmony. As the weeks turned into months, I cherished those Thursdays, never missing a chance to reconnect and nurture our friendship. I even made a mental note to repay the $60, but truthfully, it mattered less and less with each passing conversation. The emphasis shifted from debt to conversation, from obligation to connection. In a way, our playful banter transformed into discussions that danced around deeper themes, life, love, aspirations, and I began to realize that money and obligations are mere facets of a much larger picture. One evening, James surprised me with an early birthday celebration, a small gathering with close friends. As we settled in with laughter and stories, I felt a sense of belonging wash over me, filling the gaps that I'd sometimes not even noticed existed. In that warm glow, I leaned over and whispered to James, "Hey, I owe you something." He looked at me quizzically, his eyebrow raised, and I continued, this deep sense of gratitude for helping me see what truly matters. He just chuckled and nudged me playfully, a silent acknowledgement of our journey together. Though the rainy Thursdays still came, they carried a different energy now. They were soaked in laughter, born of warmth, and threaded with the beautiful realization that sometimes a rough patch can lead to a tapestry of richer connections. And though I never explicitly paid him back that $60, what emerged was far more valuable, an understanding that true friendship transcends financial debts, weaving an everlasting bond that brightens even the darkest of days. Perhaps, in its own way, that really was a payment worth cherishing. In the weeks that followed, I found myself smiling each time I heard the gentle patter of rain against my window. What used to feel monotonous now evoked an aurora of warmth in my heart. Those rainy Thursdays transformed into a cherished routine. I could almost hear the rain whispering secrets of camaraderie while I shuffled into my living room, bundled in a cozy blanket, a steaming mug of tea cradled in my hands. My phone buzzed to life, and a familiar name lit up the screen, Lucas. We had developed our own rhythm, a dance of banter and understanding that flowed easily, aided by shared memories and laughter. "Hey, you ready for our rain date?" the text read. Smiling to myself, I replied with a quick always. As I threw on my favorite hoodie, ready to dive into yet another cozy chapter of our friendship. Lucas arrived shortly after, a playful grin plastered across his face. "I brought snacks," he announced, producing a crinkly bag of popcorn and some gummy bears as if they were the treasures of a long-lost expedition. Settled on my couch, we slipped into our ritual, Netflix binging through the dreariest of mean days, outlining an adventure. Dipping into the surreal and the comedic, tracing myriad twists across genres, just like our conversations. And as the rain continued its serenade outside, something curious happened. Each time we laughed, each time we shared a meaningful look or a story from our past, I often found myself reflecting on the emotional balance we'd struck, threading through memories that we hadn't quite explored before. "I was thinking about that one time you tried to teach me how to cook," Lucas teased, nudging my shoulder. "You nearly burnt the house down." We both erupted in laughter, the shared embarrassment that once lurked in the corners now an emblem of progress, of understanding we had built upon one another's vulnerabilities. "Hey, don't forget I saved our lives from those flaming pancakes," I countered, recalling the chaos with a smirk. He shot back an exaggerated gasp, mock horror in his eyes. "I wouldn't call them pancakes. They were more like edible hockey pucks." I laughed harder, each taunt adding another layer to the fabric of our friendship. But nestled amid all the joy was something heavier, lurking just beneath the surface, a quiet contemplation about the essence of our exchanges. I had been hesitant to confront the emotional complexities that lay intertwined with our shared experiences. It was Lucas who finally led me there, unknowingly yet gently. With the popcorn bowl long emptied and the final credits rolling on yet another movie, I found myself breaking the easy banter, wanting to lay bare a thought that had occupied my mind. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about that $60, I said, sifting through my memories. "It's strange, but I feel like it became this little anchor for me, a symbol of how we needed that moment back then." Lucas turned to me, and his gaze grew serious. "You really don't need to feel guilty about that. I mean, we've moved past it, haven't we?" His voice was gentle, yet firm, a guiding light through the murkier waters. "But I appreciate that you're thinking of it differently now." The honesty in his tone ignited a flicker of warmth inside me. It showed me how fragile friendships can feel, how they can be caught up in miscommunications or assumptions. But it also reminded me of how imperative it is to find that empathy, to seek understanding instead of cementing a line between us. We lingered in that silence, where nothing needed to be filled with words as the calming sound of raindrops on the window enveloped us. But as if carrying the weight of that moment, I reached for him, causing a spontaneous whirlwind of revelations to unspool between us. Thank you for being patient with me through all that. What are friends for? He shrugged, smiling softly, yet the sincerity rippled through his eyes, anchoring me in the moment. That revealed something profound within me. The comfort of connection we had both nurtured through our shared antics and deep conversations was everything I had truly needed, more than any monetary value ever could hold. I realized that it wasn't about erasing the debt, nor tying it neatly with a bow, but about celebrating the transformation it had invoked in us. And as we settled into a more comfortable silence, I felt a lightness wash over me, the previously heavy air of expectations gently dispersing into something far richer. Fast forward again to another rainy Thursday. It was becoming my favorite sanctuary each week. This time, I felt the soft tickle of excitement ripple through my veins as Lucas arrived with a new bottle of board games and tales ready to unfurl. We played, we teased, and we occasionally drifted into deeper conversations, additional layers of our lives revealed moment by moment. In the end, I didn't need to pay him back. Instead, the debt faded, replaced instead by a tapestry of trust woven through shared experiences, a deeper connection that shimmered more brightly than any money exchanged could manage. And through the seemingly mundane, fragile threads of rainy Thursdays, we built a bond that could weather any storm, eager and ready for whatever lay ahead. It was a Saturday afternoon when I found myself sitting across from my younger brother, Sam, in our favorite coffee shop, the air filled with the rich aroma of brewing espresso and baked goods that set my nerves on edge more than I cared to admit. I loved Sam, really. He was funny and sweet, but sometimes his quirks, an endearing part of his autism, would test my patience. As he meticulously explained the minutiae of a video game I had no interest in, he kept pausing to correct me whenever I mispronounced a character's name or misunderstood the plot. I could feel the familiar irritation bubbling up, making me wonder if I was the only one who noticed. You don't have to correct me every single time, I finally blurted out, looking down at my coffee cup as if I were trying to see my own troubled reflection in the dark liquid. The cafe was buzzing around us, but in that moment, it felt like we were in our own world, one where I was both the older sibling and, apparently, the villain. I looked at Sam, his expression shifting from shock to hurt, and immediately wanted to retract my words. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. But he didn't reply, just stared at his half-eaten muffin, as if the crumbs had suddenly become the most interesting thing in the room. I knew I should have just let him share his passion without interruption. After all, this was what made Sam happy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost my temper and crossed a line. My thoughts raced, I was tired, overwhelmed with work and everyday life's pressures, yet here was my brother, excitedly sharing a piece of his world with me. Shouldn't I be more supportive? And yet, this constant need for accuracy felt suffocating at times. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became with myself. My silence hung heavy between us until he finally whispered, I just want to help. In that moment, it hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't merely about a character's name. It was about Sam wanting to connect, to share his knowledge, and my dismissiveness had dimmed that spark. As we left the cafe, I resolved to be more patient, to remember that my brother's corrections didn't stem from a desire to belittle me but from a place of connection, even if it sometimes felt stifling. A couple of weeks later, I found myself texting him random things I was learning from a podcast about his favorite games, asking for his thoughts and deepening our conversations. We still had our moments, sure, I still occasionally winced when he'd launch into a correction I didn't ask for. But each time it happened, I reminded myself why I loved hearing him speak about his passions, and I found my frustrations melting away. I'd like to think I wasn't the asshole in this story after all, but someone learning to navigate this complex bond. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when it hit me just how much progress we'd made. I was curled up on the couch with a steaming mug of tea, listening to the sound of raindrops tapping against the window, and I had this overwhelming urge to share something exciting I'd learned about an upcoming game release that we'd both been anticipating. Instead of the involuntary dread I usually felt, I picked up my phone, hesitated for just a moment, and texted him. Hey, I just read they're adding an interdimensional feature to the new game, can you believe it? Within seconds, my brother's text alert chimed. Yeah. Interdimensional travel means they could really expand the story. I hope they keep the parallel universe idea in mind. I felt a surge of warmth in my chest, a connection that felt more genuine than any correction he'd ever thrown my way. It was moments like these that reminded me how deep our bond ran, masked beneath layers of quirks and differences. Of course, that didn't mean everything was perfect. Just a week later, I made the seemingly innocent mistake of calling one of the game characters a villain during one of our usual gaming sessions. Almost instantly, he shot back a correction, pointing out that the character's motives were far more complex than my casual label suggested. You know his backstory is about redemption, right? You can't just label him like that. I felt the familiar sting of irritation creeping back in, but I paused. I was about to reply with a snarky retort when I remembered the conversations we had been sharing, the laughter and insights eclipsing the corrections. Instead, I took a breath and said, "Fair point." I needed that reminder. I sometimes get way too caught up in my impressions. His surprise was palpable even through the screen. Glad you see it that way. The story is nuanced. Learning and understanding make it even more exciting. He didn't know it, but I was beginning to feel the weight of my previous frustrations lift, replaced with a sense of appreciation for how much more he had to offer. Slowly, I started consciously approaching our conversations with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Sometimes I'd even invite his corrections, framing them as challenges rather than annoyances. It became a game of sorts. What knowledge could he share next? Our hangouts transformed from mere game nights into deep dives where he could geek out about characters, plot points, and storytelling techniques. Yes, I still occasionally winced at the over-explanations or overly detailed corrections, but now, instead of seeing them as bothersome interruptions, I began to find them oddly charming. They were pieces of my brother that shaped him into who he was, a passionate perfectionist with a heart bursting at the seams for his interests. I also discovered that in those moments of explaining, something beautiful happened. We were bonding over the nuances of the narratives we both adored. One Sunday, we decided to take a break from our usual weekend routine to watch a movie marathon based on some of our favorite game franchises. A few hours in, I noticed something magical unfolding. He was animated, speaking excitedly about how he would adapt the stories differently. You know, if I were to write this, I'd change the ending completely. It's not true to the character's development, he said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. Instead of asking him to dial it back or find a quieter volume, I just smiled and nodded, letting his passion wash over me like an invigorating wave. I chimed in with my own ideas, and before long, we were brainstorming a story of our own, piecing together plot lines and character arcs as if screenwriting was a game in itself. It felt like both of us were learning in that moment, not just about the movies or games we loved, but about each other, who we were as siblings, and how we could evolve. I had to admit, there was something healing about this shift. I've learned that sometimes, it takes a little vulnerability to bring two people closer. Maybe I wasn't just tolerating his corrections anymore. Maybe I was actually embracing his perspective, recognizing that our divergent approaches were a tapestry that made our relationship rich and vibrant. As the rain continued to patter softly against the windows, I luxuriated in the knowledge that we were navigating this complex relationship together. I found myself feeling grateful, hoping that even as my brother poured out corrections, I could do my part to help him see that his voice mattered to me. It may still get complicated sometimes, but I felt that complexity was what made our bond so beautifully unique. And maybe, just maybe, it was this all-encompassing journey through learning and understanding that turned out to be the real win. One quiet afternoon, as I perched on the edge of my bed, fully immersed in the imaginary worlds of my favorite fantasy novel, my phone buzzed insistently. It was him, of course, my brother, the ever-passionate encyclopedia of all things gaming. I felt a tingle of excitement mixed with a hint of anxiety, that familiar nod as I wondered if this text would be another innocent inquiry or a deep dive into one of his meticulous corrections. Did you know that in the lore of Arcadia, the main character actually has a hidden backstory that ties in with the prophecy? I smiled at his enthusiasm, picturing him animatedly pacing around his room while typing. Yeah, I just learned about that on a podcast. I replied, careful to convey my interest. That's when he dropped it. I'm glad you like it, but you actually missed a couple of key points. You see. And there it was, that familiar avalanche of information I hadn't asked for, cascading down like an unexpected rain shower. My first instinct was to feel that familiar frustration rising, a heat creeping up my neck. But this time something clicked inside me. Instead of letting that prickly feeling take hold, I chose to breathe, sinking deeper into the moment, feeling the vulnerability behind his enthusiasm. I wasn't just being corrected, I was witnessing his excitement and love for a topic that mattered deeply to him. Dude, I really appreciate you sharing this with me, I texted back, and I'm totally here for the details. But I also want to dive into this together, you know? I want to connect over it, not just absorb facts. There was a pause, and for a moment, I worried I might have crossed a line again. But a few moments later, my phone chimed with his reply. "Okay, I can try that. I just get really excited, and I want you to know everything." And in those few exchanged messages, I felt like I was glimpsing a new layer of our relationship, one built on understanding, empathy, and respect. The rain continued to rhythmically tap against the glass, a soothing soundtrack to my thoughts as I contemplated how this new approach could alleviate that tension that sometimes bubbled between us. It felt like stepping into a dance. I was learning the rhythm, realizing I didn't have to lead or follow, just move together. In the weeks that followed, our conversations evolved in unexpected ways. We began sharing our interpretations of his favorite games, parsing through characters and plots, discovering that sharing ideas was just as enriching as correcting each other. One Thursday evening, we settled down for a marathon of an old game, the kind that made us both nostalgic. As I stumbled through levels and faced wily enemies, he grinned at my blunders but hesitated to correct me. Instead, he cheered me on, his encouragement washing over me like a warm breeze. I could feel the shift in our dynamic, like turning a page in a book where the story finally aligns. By the time I slammed that virtual sword into the final boss, we both erupted into cheers, the air thick with camaraderie. It was genuine. It was beautiful. Reflecting on our journey, I realized we were two flawed yet perfectly unique characters navigating this intricate world together, learning to appreciate each other's quirks. Sure, there might be hiccups now and then, maybe some unexpected corrections still would slip through, but now, when they did, I'd remind myself of this growth, this bond that was as rich and vibrant as the stories woven into our favorite games. Looking back, I didn't just learn how to handle those moments of correction, I learned to cherish our conversations, seeing them as threads that connected us in ways I never fully understood before. This journey wasn't just about me, it was about us building and redefining how we communicated. And as I sank into my pillow that night, listening to the pitter-patter of the rain, I felt so much more at peace with the trials of our relationship, grateful to navigate this complex tapestry together, wondering what stories we would continue to weave as we journeyed forward. I still remember the night I got the call that changed everything. I was sprawled out on my couch, munching on cold pizza and trying to binge-watch a series I had been neglecting. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with my brother Alex's name lighting up the screen, and I paused, shoving a slice aside to answer. He sounded frantic. His dog, Max, had swallowed a toy and was in serious trouble. The vet bills were going to be astronomical, and Alex, who always seemed to live paycheck to paycheck, was in panic mode. I could hear Max whimpering faintly in the background, but what struck me most was the desperation in Alex's voice. He said he'd do anything to save him. Then came the awkward but necessary reminder of the $7,000 I had received as a reimbursement for a recent trip, money that I had earmarked for a much-needed down payment on a car. That dream felt so close, and yet here was my brother, my only family, pleading for help. "I don't know what to do, I can't afford this, please, I'll pay you back," he begged, and I could practically hear Max's tiny heart racing in my imagination. I felt torn apart. I pictured myself in Alex's shoes, drowning in worry, and how helpless I'd feel without the means to help Max. But that money wasn't just meant for my car, it represented stability and independence. With my heart heavy, I said, "Okay, I'll help, but you have to promise to pay me back." The relief in his voice was palpable, but it left me with a knot in my stomach because I knew I was setting aside my own needs, yet another instance of playing the role of the responsible sibling. A month later, I received a text that Alex's vet bills had exceeded my original offer. The more I sat with this, the more my anxiety grew. I had scrimped and saved to take that trip and had budgeted every cent meticulously, only to consider forking it over to Alex without any clear path back to my own goals. When I pressed him for repayment guarantees, he just got defensive. "You don't understand, Claire. This is about saving a life." I was a mix of frustration and guilt, feeling like he was weaponizing Max's health against me. It didn't help that Max had surgery, he was doing better, but I was still financially adrift, and my own bills were piling up. I started to withdraw, hesitating to reach out to my brother, fearing he might expect more from me. Our conversations became strained, every message loaded with unspoken tension. I felt like a villain for wanting my financial security but also a fool for not stepping up more. AITA for not just giving this up? I want to support him, but how can I? I contemplated, sitting on the edge of a precursory decision, my emotions tangled up like a knot I couldn't quite untie. Every day felt like a weigh-in, balancing my love for my brother against my needs. I finally reached out, heart pounding, and we talked it out. He reiterated how grateful he was but made me realize he needed to own his responsibilities, too. In that moment of raw honesty, we both recognized that familial bonds shouldn't be measured in money. We found a way forward, adjusting his payments while developing new understandings of our roles. It's been a month since our conversation, and though Alex still hasn't fully paid me back, I can feel the shift in our dynamic. We're more communicative now, working together on building that sibling bond while slowly repairing our financial strains. I'm still working toward my car and letting go of that guilt that weighed so heavy on my shoulders. As for Max, he seems to be thriving, wagging his tail more than ever, and honestly, the sight of him bouncing around has been worth every unspent dollar. Life goes on, and so do we. I never thought that a dog could teach humans so much about resilience and love, but here we are. Sitting in my living room on a rainy Saturday morning, I watch Max sprawled out on the couch, belly up, legs splayed like he owns the place. His existence has brought this unexpected joy into our lives, a bright spot amid the turbulent waters we've been navigating. As I sip my coffee, I think back to where it all started, the phone call from Alex that threw our family finances into disarray. At first, it felt like a betrayal when he asked me for the money I had reimbursed for our trip. $7,000 was no small amount, especially when it had been earmarked for my car payments. But the moment he voiced his concern about Max's health, suddenly I wasn't just considering my expenses, I was wrestling with the moral weight of my decision. Was I being selfish for holding on to what was technically mine, even if it could help save a life? That hum of internal conflict lingered for days. I remember pacing my apartment late at night, phone in hand, my mind racing with thoughts of Alex's mounting vet bills and the reality of Max's situation, a mix of concern for my brother and the loyalty I felt toward my own responsibilities. Our late-night conversations grew more profound, more vulnerable. I started understanding that Alex wasn't just my brother but also a guy who felt trapped, scared, and desperately in love with his dog. It shifted something in our relationship. My decision not to transfer that money immediately felt like an anchor in this new, tumultuous sea we were sailing. Over time, as I slowly began to find my footing again through little jobs and gig opportunities, I'd worked out a plan to address my own financial concerns without abandoning him completely. I agreed to help him with a fraction of the costs because I knew that Max's well-being weighed heavier on his heart than any financial burden I was carrying. Then there was that one Saturday morning after Alex had worked late into the night just to bring in some extra cash. I could see the exhaustion drawn on his face. I made us both a hearty breakfast, scrambled eggs with toast and avocado, and set it on the kitchen table. The smell of the coffee brewing and the sizzle of the eggs seemed to wake him from a stupor, and as he sat down, I could feel the tension easing between us a little more. "You didn't have to do this," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I'm fine managing on my own, you know." "Yeah, but I think we both need this," I replied, feeling the warmth of our moment. That morning felt different. As we shared stories about our childhood, about fights over whether we were going to eat cereal or a sandwich for dinner, that affectionate banter we held so dear, I noticed our walls were coming down. I could see how much he cared about Max, and I was easing into my own role of support rather than a reluctant benefactor. By now, it was clear that our relationship was morphing. Thanks to late-night chats, hearty breakfasts, and those small decisions to be there for each other, I could finally release the tension built up from those days of resentment and guilt. As the weeks rolled on, I found that seeing Max bounce around with energy made the guilt of not having my car more bearable. Each evening, I would join Alex on walks with Max, enjoying the fresh air. We'd talk about silly things, music, movies, and his latest attempts at becoming a TikTok sensation. I never imagined the world of dog stardom could be so competitive, but seeing him get more animated discussing it lifted my spirits. And sure, things aren't perfect yet. There are still disagreements about finances and the lingering edge of unfulfilled expectations regarding repayment, but we're working through it together. It's less of a transaction and more about reconnecting. We're nurturing our connection instead of guarding our pockets. I still want my car, and I still don't have all my ducks in a row financially, but I've come to realize that there's something more valuable in these moments with Alex and Max. Life is messy, and sometimes we end up in these tangled webs, but as I stare at Max now, I recognize that we're all figuring it out in our own time, one paw, $1, and one fragile bond at a time. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the living room where I sat with Alex, both of us fully enveloped in a narrative that was still very much in progress. Max, his soft golden fur catching the light just right, lay sprawled on the floor, blissfully unaware of the intricacies of human transactions and expectations. The vigor with which he played with his squeaky toy felt like an innocently perfect metaphor for the simplicity we all sometimes overlook. It was moments like this that made me realize how worth it was to prioritize relationships over finances, no matter how tempting it was to cling to the cold, hard numbers that dictated our realities. I glanced at Alex, who was focused on his phone, probably debating whether to text the veterinary clinic about Max's follow-up appointment. There was a new tenderness to our interactions. The shadows of previous conversations no longer seemed to linger like an unwelcome cloud above us. Instead, they were softer now, like hints of rain, bringing life to dry earth. "Hey," I said, breaking through his concentration. "You know I'm proud of you, right? For making decisions that are best for Max." He looked up, surprise flickering across his face momentarily before his features settled into an almost shy smile. "Yeah? Thanks," he replied, rubbing the back of his neck, a young habit he hadn't outgrown. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just flailing around," I chuckled, shaking my head. "We all are. And flailing is totally okay. Just means we're trying." The energy in the room shifted again, a sort of understanding settling in the space around us. It was a reminder of our childhood days, silly but honest adventures where flailing often resulted in laughter. With each conversation, we shared not only the events of our days but also our vulnerabilities, our doubts. I found solace in sharing my worries about my finances. Sometimes I would even admit my lingering desires for that car while Alex voiced his fears about the vet bills piling up and how they would affect his already meager budget. Yet, there we were, two adults learning that money isn't the core of our bond but merely a side note. As if on cue, Max leapt up, capturing our attention as he chased his toy across the room, skidding slightly as he turned a corner too quickly. "Super dog," I shouted playfully and tossed his ball toward the kitchen. His excitement was infectious, and for a few moments, we watched him, both of us chuckling at the silliness of it all. It wasn't lost on me how Max had somehow tethered us back together in a way that money never could. He was family, and sustaining him meant nourishing our relationship too. There was still a long road ahead. I could feel the weight of unfulfilled promises and unpaid bills lingering, but each day of shared responsibilities felt like a little victory. I had let go of the need to keep precise accounts between us. Our relationship was worth more than dollar signs. Instead, I focused on being there when Alex called for moral support and being flexible when it came to managing my own financial expectations. Weeks went by and the dynamic continued to shift from necessity to genuine connection. Sometimes, while Alex was working late or volunteering with Max at the local shelter, I'd steal moments for myself, negotiating my own budgets, trying to find a way to carve out a new sense of financial independence. Instead of pressuring myself to rebalance the scales, I began to find joy in little luxuries, a fancy coffee after a long day or a new book to immerse myself in. It wasn't about recklessness but rather a practice in nurturing my own happiness alongside my obligations to my brother and his dog. One evening, sprawled comfortably on the couch, Alex and I watched an old movie together, the kind that stretched between dramas and comedies, filled with awkward pauses and inopportune moments. Max was nestled between us, snoring softly as we munched on popcorn. I felt a serene sense of contentment washing over me. It struck me that the burdens I thought were too heavy to carry were lightened even just by sharing the journey with someone else. I didn't know if I would ever get that car, and honestly, it started to feel relatively trivial against the backdrop of healing that was happening. Each time I saw Max bounded around, or caught a glimpse of Alex's genuine laughter, I recognized that the recalibration of our lives didn't need to revolve around a reimbursement of $7,000 after all. As the credits rolled and the room was filled with warmth from the setting sun, I smiled, grateful for both the challenges and the small victories that continually reshaped my understanding of family and commitment. Whatever came next, be it car ownership or new financial goals, would ultimately be secondary to the connections made, patched up, and reinforced through this journey of shared learning, love, and, of course, one wagging tail at a time. It started as a typical Tuesday morning for me, the usual gray light filtering through the half-drawn curtains and the sounds of the neighborhood waking up. I shuffled into the dim kitchen, coffee brewing, thoughts racing ahead of me like they often do. I was just 2 weeks into my new job as a healthcare data analyst, and despite the monotonous tasks, I found myself strangely excited, like this was my first little step into a big, adult world. I had been vying for this position ever since I graduated, earning my degree with the hopes of making a real impact in the world of health services. My enthusiasm, however, took a strange twist when I received a call from my boss that day. He told me there had been a mix-up with patient records at a nearby clinic and that I would need to come in at the end of the day to help fix it. As someone who had always valued personal privacy and the importance of confidentiality, I was unsettled. The notion of accessing sensitive patient files made me shiver, but I shook off the discomfort, reminding myself this was part of my job. Fast forward to the evening, and I entered the clinic, feeling a knot in my stomach. The fluorescent lights above buzzed ominously as I was introduced to the IT team and pointed toward a small room cluttered with outdated computers. That's when I encountered her, Melissa, a nurse who seemed to embody calm in the storm of disarray surrounding us. As we sat together trying to untangle the mess, I tried to keep things lighthearted, joking about the nature of paperwork and technology, but she quickly quieted. "Just remember, HIPAA violations are serious," she said, her voice low and slightly unsteady. That warning took root in my mind, not because I was making any potential mistake but because I sensed something deeper in her tone, a burden she carried. I pressed her about it gently. "You seem stressed, Melissa. Is there something I should know?" She sighed, glancing at the door. "It's not about the patients who've already seen their records. It's about a new patient. You won't believe what happened." I felt a chill run through me as she recounted the tale. A patient, a woman named Sarah, had shown up mysteriously at the clinic requesting her records but had no identity. Melissa said Sarah wore odd clothing, spoke in riddles, and had an unsettling gaze that left the staff feeling watched. I could almost see the tension in her shoulders lighten as she spoke, a shared fear between us. It turned the mundane task of analyzing data into something almost mystical. Hours passed, and we were deep into a discussion of privacy, ethics, and the essence of patient identity when a sharp knock on the door jolted me upright. A man, disheveled and panting, burst in. "You found her, right? You have to find her," he yelled. The room fell silent before I collected my thoughts. Confusion swirled around us. Melissa ushered him outside, but I could hear a harried discussion happening just beyond the walls. It felt like an eruption that I was not meant to witness. When they returned, tension wound tighter than a coiled spring. The man explained, "Sarah is not who she says she is. She doesn't have a history in our files. It's like she's a ghost." He looked feverish, as though he had been chasing shadows. My heart raced. Was the woman we were trying to help someone trapped in a web of secrets? Or was she a danger, cloaked in anonymity? I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me, but curiosity tugged at my senses too. "What does she want?" I finally asked. The man's eyes darted, fear shadowing his breath. "She wants answers. She thinks someone is after her." We were thrown into chaos. As Melissa and I resumed our tasks, I could feel my pulse quicken at every intimate detail. Data entries felt like interrogations as I plotted course after course through our systems, trying to piece together the answers to the enigma concealed within our sterile walls. The weight of records heavier than I'd anticipated hung over me. I replayed our conversation about HIPAA over and over, ensuring I was not crossing lines I didn't intend to cross, while my mind tangled with each unexplained piece of information. It became an obsession. How could a woman simply not exist? As the sun fell further, shadows began to stretch along the walls, the clinic growing quieter. Eventually, Melissa and I navigated deeper into the records, sensing a shift of urgency as we worked to uncover the truth. When we finally hit pay dirt, an old record buried so deep that no one had bothered to check, it felt like winning a race against the clock. Her name popped up alongside a series of previous appointments and a disconcerting note that detailed an anomalous transfer between facilities. Melissa smiled with relief, but I couldn't shake the discomfort settling over me. I expected every moment to slip into the realm of horror, fearing it might spiral out of control. As we walked the records to our supervisor, I felt a strange pull back toward Sarah, like she was a part of me now. What came next was surprising. Melissa and I both had to face frustrating bureaucracy and laws, trying to make sense of Sarah's identity, the paperwork spinning us around in knots of red tape. Each phone call became a trial, testing the limits of propriety and patience until I was left wondering if we would ever resolve the chaos that had enveloped us. As the clock struck midnight, a decision had to be made, to keep looking and risk breaking rules or accept what we discovered and move on. Taking a breath, I opted for honesty. We approached our supervisor and bared the whole situation, feeling the weight of truth lifting us slightly. What followed were some tense moments I will never forget. My heart raced as the supervisor scrutinized our findings, and I held my breath, praying we hadn't ventured too far. In that moment of clarity, I understood the gravity of our roles, the essence of humanity fused into every record, and how vital it was to respect these lives woven together through the healthcare system. As for Sarah, the answer came swiftly, the right personnel followed up, though I never learned what fate awaited her. I left the clinic that night exhausted yet relieved, acutely aware that the thrill of ethereal mystery and the deeply rooted seriousness of caring for patient identity often clash in the world of healthcare. Months passed after that fateful evening, and the experience began to fade into a soft recollection, just another tale tucked into my mind, woven among the many threads of my career. Then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, I received a familiar message. It was Melissa. "Hey," it read, "you won't believe what I've just found out about Sarah." Curiosity surged through me, and as I read, I couldn't help but wonder if I hadn't just become part of the story of someone who had carved their existence between identities. Just like that, I realized, sometimes those we think are lost may hold secrets worth keeping, and our paths cross not by mere chance, but by a shared understanding of who we are beneath the masks we wear. And so I relayed back, "Tell me everything." Melissa's response came swiftly, like a whisper caught on the wind, full of urgency and intrigue. "I was going through some old social media posts, and it appears Sarah's been leading a double life. Did you know she used to work in a psychiatric hospital? She posted about her experiences under a pseudonym, and there are some pretty intense revelations in there. You should see the comments she gets, people sharing their struggles, their fears, and tying them into her stories in ways that are surprisingly insightful." A chill ran through me. I had known Sarah only as the soft-spoken woman with a penchant for vintage books and herbal teas, never as someone who had grappled with the complexities of mental health in a professional setting. "Do you think she's still in touch with anyone from there?" I texted, my mind racing with a river of thoughts. Would knowing more about her spark some deeper connection, or was this merely stumbling onto territory better left alone? Melissa replied in a way that made me think she had kicked her own thoughts around, too. Well, I didn't dig that deep, but she mentioned a case in one of her posts. It was cryptically fascinating. You could check if any of her old colleagues are still around. The notion struck me hard. What if this case was pivotal, not only to Sarah's past but perhaps intertwined with her reasons for stepping back from society? Instinctively, I felt a wave of empathy wash over me mixed with a hint of dread. I couldn't help but picture Sarah, clocking in day after day, carrying the weight of another person's pain, while she herself might have been drowning in her own struggles. The next day was a haze of mixed emotions, curiosity mixed with caution. Somewhere within me, a voice cautioned against delving too deep, reminding me of my role as the friend of the storyteller, not the investigator. But I felt that I couldn't just let this mystery slip through my fingers. Before I knew it, I began my search, tracking down various forums where ex-employees shared their experiences. Each thread unraveled new layers, pieces of a puzzle that felt achingly familiar. Eventually, I stumbled across a name that stood out, Dr. Hargrove, Sarah's former supervisor. The reviews of her were a mix of reverence and caution, as people praised her for her intuition but also warned of her unwavering intensity. Feeling daring, I reached out to Dr. Hargrove via LinkedIn, but the message sat unanswered for weeks as I tried to balance my fascination with an uneasy sense that I was intruding on something far more personal than I could understand. Then, almost unexpectedly, the notification popped up. A quick blip that sent adrenaline coursing through me as I read Dr. Hargrove's reply. "Let's discuss. How did you come to know Sarah?" I paused, contemplating how to respond, businesslike, or friendly and casual, but in the end, emotion tugged at me. I filled my response with the truth, how Sarah had become dear to me over our conversations, artfully circumventing the eerie nature of my inquiry. Soon, we arranged a call. As we spoke, Dr. Hargrove shared fragmented tales of Sarah's time in the ward, illuminating flashes of bravery amidst darker times, illuminating how she had been a fierce advocate for her patients' rights. It felt like I was sitting on a springboard, ready to leap into the unknown depths of Sarah's past, and yet I could hardly breathe as she detailed an incident with a patient that almost garnished Sarah both admiration and ire within the hospital community. She pushed boundaries in ways that rattled some of the staff, the doctor described, her voice steady yet tinged with endearment. She believed in radical empathy, often becoming too emotionally involved in her cases. It led to a very critical incident that forced her to reevaluate her place in the world. My heart raced at the weight of her words. I realized that Sarah held stories that might shatter what I thought I knew of her. They were pieces of her soul woven into those moments, and whether she shared them freely or kept them locked away, they remained an inseparable part of her journey. As the call ended, a lingering question hung in the air. Was this knowledge something I should reveal to her, or would it expose vulnerabilities that Sarah had worked hard to conceal? In the following days, my heart grew heavier, crafting narratives in my mind where revealing this truth brought only pain. One night, unable to sleep, I took the plunge. I texted her, my fingers trembling over the screen. "Hey, can we talk? I found out some things about your past." Silence enveloped the air, thick and awkward as I stared at my phone, half hoping for a reply but equally dreading it. When her response finally came, it read simply, "About what?" My pulse quickened. She had a right to know that her reflections had inspired earthquakes in someone else's life. I told her everything, all at once, my heart racing, projecting my excitement while fearing the abrupt end of our connection. It was futile to deny, she was a storyteller in every sense. But Sarah's reply was slower this time, each dot cueing a new pang of anxiety within me. The chat fizzled out, leaving a stuttered beat of anticipation hanging thick in the air. With each passing minute, I replayed every detail, how brave she had been, how compassionate her words were, yet I feared for the memories that the shadows carved into her spirit, ones she may not wish to confront. When she finally typed, "I didn't think anyone would ever ask me about that. It has been a while," I felt a tidal wave of relief rush through me. I stepped carefully, acknowledging the fragility housed in her revelation while also wanting to encourage her to share more. We spent hours on the phone after that, her words weaving a tapestry of pain and hope in ways I had never imagined before. I finally grasped the depth of her character. She wasn't lost between the stories and identities, she was the sum of them, an intricate web of experiences that continued to shape her. When our call finished, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, longing to draw her out of the shell that had quietly encased her. It became evident, sometimes, behind the closed doors of old memories, lies a path to healing, a beckoning for both of us to remind ourselves who we were beyond the masks we created. As the days turned into weeks, we exchanged messages more freely now, her guarded tone melting into something friendly and real. And I wondered, in passing, about what stories I too held tightly behind my own facade, cherished fragments that might intertwine with hers. Perhaps we both shared the weight of pasts and secrets, each of us learning to navigate our truths together, a quiet understanding that some journeys are meant to be shared. And so, in this tangled dance of revelations, Melissa's message came to echo within me. Sometimes those we think are lost hold secrets worth keeping, and who knows? Perhaps in every hidden truth lies the potential for connection greater than we could ever envision. Melissa's response was instant, a flurry of text that felt both electric and weighty. "You know Sarah, right? She worked at that clinic a few months back, the one where you used to go for therapy?" I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see me. The memories of that clinic were still vivid, the sterile smell of antiseptic mingling with the faint scent of lavender that the receptionist sprinkled in the air. Sarah had been warm, a gentle presence amidst the cold sterility of mental health care. "Well," Melissa continued, "she's been let go. They said it was for violating protocol, but there's more to it." At that moment, curiosity twisted in my gut. Sarah had always seemed so careful, so attuned to the patient's needs. What did she do? I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly as I awaited Melissa's reply. "I ran into her at the bar a week ago," Melissa wrote slowly, "and she was different. More erratic. She mentioned something about patient files, but she didn't elaborate. I think she might have been researching something she shouldn't have. And you know what's wild? She was asking about you." My heart skipped a beat. Why would Sarah be looking into me? Was she worried, or was it something deeper? The butterflies in my stomach fluttered violently as I recalled my last session with Sarah. She'd seemed concerned when I mentioned dreams that felt too real and haunting moments that clung to me like shadows. Was my own world now somehow threading into Sarah's unraveling tale? I let the questions linger as I replied, "What do you mean, asking about me? What did she say?" The pause felt interminable, each second stretching into infinity as I held my breath. Finally, Melissa's words came trickling through, laden with weight. "She seemed concerned about your last diagnosis. She mentioned she was worried you were in more danger than you realized." I felt a chill creep up my spine. My mind raced back to those countless times I had poured my heart into therapy, the honest exchanges that had found a home in Sarah's understanding gaze. Had I inadvertently exposed some hidden secret of my own? The idea that I might be a part of a story much larger than my own made me uneasy. I typed, "Danger? How? I don't understand." But before Melissa could respond, a flood of memories surged within me, the names, the diagnoses, the whispers of HIPAA that seemed to echo through the hallways of every psychiatric facility I had ever stepped foot in. Suddenly, I recalled my own feelings of being trapped, seen yet unseen, always an open book to those with the power to scribble in my pages. In that moment of reflection, I began to wonder if Sarah had realized that perhaps I was more than just another patient, more than just a series of symptoms and treatment plans drafted in the dim light of a therapist's office. Maybe I too had secrets worth sharing, though I had built my own wall to protect them. My thoughts spiraled again as Melissa's follow-up came. She wanted me to find you and tell you this. She thinks you need to see her, to understand something she uncovered. My mind reeled. Was it reckless to consider meeting with someone who had been fired, someone on the fringes of this clinical world? Yet, a part of me felt the pull towards Sarah, an anchor that called out through the disarray of my thoughts. Maybe she held the key to understanding those hidden fragments of myself I had kept so tightly wrapped. Where can I find her? I found myself typing without thought. Melissa replied almost immediately, I can give you her address, but I don't feel good about this, you know? Be careful. That care rang like a distant bell against the backdrop of my apprehension, and I found comfort in it, a reminder that I wasn't truly alone in this moment. As I read the address, a sense of determination washed over me, mingling with the anxiety that had taken residence in my chest. I could investigate my own narrative, perhaps, like Sarah, I had been woven into a larger fabric of existence, one that danced between known truths and hidden realities. And so, with every heartbeat echoing my pulsing thoughts, I made up my mind. I needed to meet Sarah, to forge a connection that could shed light on her mysteries and perhaps my own. The sun dipped low in the sky as I prepared myself for the encounter. I felt the shapes of the shadows outside elongate, stretching toward the horizon, much like the threads of fate pulling us together. As I drove toward her address, the scenery blurred by, each mile marked with a question, a longing, an eagerness to embrace whatever awaited me. My mind buzzed like a hive, each curiosity a little bee searching for a flower, unsure of the nectar hidden within. Would I find answers to my own buried truths, or would I unravel the deeper meanings behind Sarah's journey? I parked outside a modest apartment complex that looked both inviting and intimidating, and as I stepped out of the car, a strange calm settled over me, settling the racing thoughts tumbling like jumbled leaves in the wind. I approached her door and raised my hand to knock, my pulse quickening as I fought the urge to turn back. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I knocked. Each sound echoed like a heartbeat against the wood. I stood there, waiting, breath held. It felt as though the world had condensed into this moment. A few moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing Sarah's familiar face, though it seemed altered, marked by worry and disarray. Her eyes flickered with recognition and a hint of relief, as if she had been bracing herself for this moment. "You came," she said softly, and just like that, I stepped over the threshold, into her story, our stories united, as curiosity whispered infinite possibilities of truths yet to be revealed. And as I crossed into her living space, amidst the clutter of papers, stray books on mental health, and empty coffee cups, that sense of connection blossomed, cradled in the realization that perhaps every secret worth keeping leads us not just into shadows, but toward the light of understanding ourselves and one another. I never imagined my life could pivot so dramatically over something as mundane as a locked door, but here I am, recounting the events of that fateful evening with a sense of incredulity that still lingers. My name is Alex, an ordinary 30-something guy with a desk job and a comfortable little home nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I've always prided myself on being a conscientious husband, but like everyone else, I have my moments of negligence, and perhaps it was a combination of those moments that set this all in motion. It was a Thursday night, typical in every way, until I caught a glimpse of my wife, Laura, standing by the front door, her expression a mixture of frustration and disbelief, the kind that made my chest tighten in an instant. She was holding the doorknob, twisting it back and forth while I was half awake from a cozy couch nap, remnants of my evening routine still fresh in my mind, the warm glow of the TV, a snack bowl emptied, and the soft hum of the world outside. Laura asked me, with a sting of disappointment, if I had checked the lock after she'd gone to bed, and as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I realized I had utterly spaced on that detail, again. I shrugged it off at first, making casual remarks about how I trust our neighborhood and how we had lived there for years without incident. But in the back of my mind, I felt a creeping unease as I watched her react, her brow furrowed as she responded, "It's not about trusting the neighborhood, Alex. It's about being safe." A part of me wanted to laugh it away, to dismiss her concerns as overreactions like I once did during our years together, but as she continued to express her frustration, I felt a knot forming in my stomach, linking back to my own lack of accountability. Was I really that oblivious? It became clear that this situation was a metaphorical lock waiting to be clicked open, revealing deeper issues that may have long since festered beneath our shared surface. Days passed, and the conversation wafted in and out of my mind, my interactions with Laura feeling increasingly stifled like the air on a humid summer day. I'd watch her move through the house, her movement subtle yet heavy with a sense of grounded concern, the way a cloud hangs low and suspenseful, threatening rain. I noticed the little things, the way she double-checked the locks on the windows during the day, her growing habit of closing the blinds earlier than usual, her hesitance to walk to the mailbox alone. The peaceful rhythms of our life together felt interrupted as I tried to ignore the gnawing sensation at the back of my mind. The evening we normally spent side by side on the couch morphed into quiet, fragmented moments filled with awkward silences. It all came to a head one night when I returned home later than usual after meeting some friends for dinner. There she stood in the living room, awaiting my arrival like a lighthouse beacon cutting through the fog, arms crossed with a stern look on her face that I'd never seen aimed directly at me. I opened my mouth to greet her, but the words caught in my throat. I could sense it was more than just the locked door. "Did you even check the door?" Her voice was steady but tinged with a puncturing edge that stung more than I cared to admit. I hesitated, the silence stretching into a chasm. "No, I didn't," I finally admitted, the echo of those words reverberating through the room like a confession made under duress. "I just assumed you had it." It felt pathetic, my own excuse evaporating into the atmosphere. My stomach twisted again, I could see pain flickering through her eyes, an emotion beyond mere frustration, a sense of betrayal, of being let down by me, the one person she should be able to count on. Suddenly, it struck me, it wasn't just about the door, it was about trust, about dependence, about the fragile threads that held together our relationship. I realized how much she leaned on me, expected me to be her rock, and I had neglected even the simplest thread keeping our safety intact. As we sat on the couch that night, the air thick with unspoken words and fragile hopes, I squeezed her hand and spoke softly, "I'm sorry. I thought I was being rational, but I wasn't being responsible. I promised to do better, to pay attention, to make you feel safe, not just when it's convenient for me." She responded by tracing her fingers along my palm, the tension easing as the minutes passed. The silence transformed from oppressive to contemplative, and we found ourselves deep in conversation, navigating our fears, our trust, and the small yet pressing details of our shared lives. As the moonlight spilled through the window, I understood that the lock was just a symptom of a deeper issue, my unpredictability and her need for assurance. Weeks later, our routines began to shift. I made it a point to verify every lock, not just for Laura, but as a symbol of my commitment to being present and responsible. The atmosphere in our home brightened, she smiled more, and we dove into rebuilding that connective thread, one soft conversation, one warm touch at a time. Reflection filled those quiet moments. We'd sit together on the couch, and as she leaned against me, I felt a new kind of peace emerging from our shared vulnerability. And so, in the spirit of Reddit tradition and as a reflection of this journey, I find it important to add this update. The evening I thought we were heading toward a rift transformed instead into an awakening. It wasn't just about the door or even the act of locking it. It became a way to openly articulate our needs, desires, and fears. I learned that perhaps it wasn't an AITA situation at all. Perhaps, instead, it was AITA, am I trying to learn? Because in that small, seemingly trivial episode, I discovered something profound about love, trust, and the importance of the little things in creating a safe harbor we could always come home to. The door has never been left unlocked. Again, and neither have our hearts. As the weeks rolled into months following our profound conversation about the door, I found myself reflecting on the subtle transformations in our relationship. It became a game of sorts, where each night, as I prepared to settle into bed, I would gently remind Lucy to double-check the lock, teasing her playfully about my newfound security obsession. I could feel the fortress we were building, not merely around our home but within each other, grow stronger and stronger. It was surprising how such a simple act could blossom into moments filled with tenderness and laughter, a little more anticipation before sleep took us. We began establishing new rituals, little habits that weren't mandated by duty but born out of a desire to nurture our partnership. Each evening concluded with us sharing a cup of tea on the porch, watching the day melt into night, with the faint sounds of crickets filling the air, a gentle reminder that life outside continued in a rhythm we were beginning to appreciate together. I started to look at our relationship with a new lens, where open communication became our foundation, and vulnerability, once a source of anxiety, transformed into our shared strength. I cherished those confiding moments with Lucy, preparing dinner together and laughing over burnt bread, the usual small talk evolving into deeper discussions about our hopes for the future. Conversations flowed like sacred threads binding us closer, so much so that I almost forgot what it felt like to walk that thin line of misunderstanding that we had been teetering on prior. It amazed me how our vulnerabilities morphed into stepping stones, carving pathways to rediscover the intricacies of each other's souls, learning, once again, what made us who we were. There were times, of course, where we stumbled. There were disagreements around financial decisions or the occasional miscommunication that prompted a surge of frustration, but even then, instead of retreating into silent resentments, we breathed, discussed, and gently nudged each other toward a healthier understanding. I realized that those moments are just as essential as the laughter-filled ones. They rounded us out. However, the true test of this new dynamic came on a chilly autumn night. The air bit fiercely against our cheeks, and the neighbors' laughter echoed through the street, reminding me of the warmth radiating from our home. Lucy and I were cozied up on the couch, engrossed in a movie, when suddenly an urgent knocking interrupted the cozy ambience. My heart raced. Was it a stranger? A lost traveler? That familiar feeling of anxiety tugged at my chest as I glanced at Lucy, who only nodded, encouraging me to check the door. It felt as if time had slowed. I walked to the front door, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight, feeling every heartbeat pulsing in my ears. Peering through the peephole, I was met with a young girl, maybe 10 years old, shivering and teary-eyed. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Hey there, are you all right?" Her face was lost in shadows, but I could make out the tremor of her chin and the way she rubbed her arms together, as if trying to generate warmth. I got lost. Can I call my dad? He's just around the corner." My mind spun. Here I was, in our safe bubble, our haven, facing a potential crisis. A moment of fear tangled with empathy bubbled inside me. It was a test of everything we had learned, our commitment to openness, to addressing fears head-on. "Of course, sweetie, come in," I said, opening the door wider and motioning for her to step inside. As the warmth enveloped her, she glanced back at the darkened street, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I knew that this small act could either shield her further from threats or potentially lead to something more dangerous. Lucy joined us, her nurturing presence illuminating the moment, and we quickly settled into a space of safety and comfort. I reached for my phone, handed it to the girl, and patted her on the shoulder. "Just dial the number you remember. We're right here with you." The girl's hands shook as she dialed, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke to her father. She relaxed slightly upon hearing him say he was on the way, and when she hung up the phone, her relief washed over me, filling the room with a profound quiet that seemed to hold stories of fear and safety in equal measure. When her dad finally arrived, our home transformed again, this time into a sanctuary, a temporary refuge. The girl rushed into her father's arms, and I felt an overwhelming gratitude that we were able to offer even this tiny comfort amidst her disarray. After exchanging pleasantries and ensuring she was safe, the father made it clear how invaluable our kindness was, lighting a small flame of warmth within me. After they left, as Lucy and I settled back down on the couch, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything in our life together. It suddenly struck me that it wasn't merely about locking the door, it was about being open to the world outside, understanding that the safety and love we built weren't just for ourselves but could spill over into interactions that mattered with everyone around us. The door, once just an entryway to our home, had morphed into a symbol of our commitment to compassion and understanding, not just for each other but for anyone who crossed our threshold. I turned to Lucy, and we exchanged a smile filled with warmth and an unspoken promise that we would always remain open, vulnerable but secure, cautious yet loving, a true masterpiece of coexistence. And in those moments of quiet reflection, surrounded by the fading light of the evening, I finally felt the weight of the world lift just a little, reminding me that love doesn't simply build walls, rather, it constructs bridges that lead us back to humanity, again and again, one gentle reminder, one locked door, at a time. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across our cozy living room, I could feel the gentle hum of evening settling in, the kind that wraps you in a cocoon of comfort. Lucy had lit a few candles, their soft glow flickering in harmony with the settling tranquility of the night. It was a small ritual we had embraced, a moment of unwinding where the chaos of the day seemed to melt away. The warmth of her presence reminded me that we had crafted a safe space together, not just through the physical act of locking the door, but through the emotional openness we had nurtured in our relationship. Pacing softly, I felt grateful for this revelation, How something as simple as a door could serve as a metaphor for our willingness to safeguard one another's vulnerabilities. Remember that night? Lucy asked, her voice laced with a gentle nostalgia as she curled up on the couch, her eyes sparkling with memories. The one where we both brainstormed a list of our fears? She chuckled lightly, and I joined in, recalling a time when our insecurities seemed larger than life. We had laughed as we shared everything from mundane anxieties about work to deeper concerns about our relationship. That honest exchange had unknowingly paved the way for our newfound understanding of what it meant to connect, truly connect, beyond surface-level conversations. Yeah, I replied, settling in beside her and draping an arm around her shoulders. It's amazing how vulnerability can turn into strength if we let it. The moment felt precious, the world outside blurring into insignificance as we cocooned ourselves in this intimate bubble of safety. We began to share not just our fears, but our dreams, each whisper more soothing than the last, forming a tapestry of hopes that we would nurture together. I felt a rush of contentment, realizing that each lock I checked, each door I secured, was a commitment, an act of love that transcended fear and doubt. As the bits and pieces of our evening unfolded, conversations sparked like fireworks, our discourse ranging from future vacations we dreamed about to our desire to bring a pet into our home. Lucy was still talking about getting a dog, something I had initially hesitated over, wary of the added responsibility, but the way she spoke, her eyes lighting up at the thought, began to chip away at my resistance. A dog would be more than just an addition to our lives, it would be a shared experience, a reminder of how love could flourish in the little moments, from morning walks to lazy afternoons spent on the couch. With every word exchanged, I felt the door we had just locked moments before transform into one that swung wide open, inviting in a rush of warmth. As the candles flickered gently, casting playful shadows on the walls, I could see what lay ahead of us, a future painted in shades of laughter, compassion, and unwavering support. It was empowering to realize that we weren't just locking away our fears, we were also sealing in our joys, ensuring that nothing could breach the sanctuary we were building together. In time, as the evening wore on and the moon cast a silver glow through our window, I took a moment to breathe deeply and internalize the warmth of this connection we were nurturing. The world outside felt distant, almost irrelevant, as I realized that our relationship had morphed from merely coexisting to truly living, a shared journey where each step was marked by intention and understanding. Have you ever thought about how locking the door is kind of a ritual? I mused aloud, breaking the comfortable silence that had enveloped us like a soft blanket. Lucy nodded, her dark hair catching a glimmer of candlelight. It's the first step we take in closing out the outside world, she said thoughtfully, but it also makes space for us to just be, here, in our little world. It's our way of saying, this is our time. We matter. Yes. I replied, feeling a swell of pride and love. It wasn't just about locking the door, it was about what it symbolized, the commitment to honor our space and each other. The balancing of boundaries and openness that allowed for growth without losing our individuality. I couldn't help but smile, envisioning the dog we might someday share. Next door might be the kids, or the noise of the world, but in this moment, it's just us. As the last flicker of the candles dimmed, I felt a deep reassurance envelope me, a tender acknowledgement that our bond was evolving in ways that were once unimaginable. I snuggled closer to Lucy, feeling the warmth radiating from her, a beacon in the cool night. The locked door wasn't just a safeguard, it was a promise we had made to each other, a vow to always return to the safe harbor we had created. And so, as I closed my eyes and allowed sleep to wash over me, I found solace in the laughter that echoed through the evening and the new dreams we would embrace upon waking. A door locked, yet ajar with possibility, standing as a testament to our journey. And with that, I drifted into sleep, content, loved, and forever learning. When I first stepped into Matt's house, the air was thick with memories, his collection of vinyl records lining the walls, a half-finished puzzle sitting on the dining table, and that unmistakable scent of sandalwood from the candles he loved to burn. We had shared this space for less than a year before tragedy struck. I still remember the call like it was yesterday, the way my heart sank when his sister's voice trembled through the line, telling me he was gone. Just like that, at 33, he left this world in a car accident, leaving me to navigate the wreckage of grief while still trying to honor the life we built together. It didn't take long for his parents to come knocking. They were polite but firm, suggesting that the house should return to them now that Matt was gone. It's family property, they said, glossing over the emotional tapestry woven in every corner. He wouldn't have wanted you burdened with it. I remember standing in the living room, feeling like an intruder in my own life. Their voices grew louder, demanding a surrender I wasn't ready to make. Thoughts swirled inside my head. Was I being selfish for wanting to keep the place that had become a part of me? Matt had always said home was where you felt safe, and this was my sanctuary, my last connection to him. But how could I deny his parents their grief? The guilt of wanting to hold onto this space while knowing they were mourning their son weighed heavily on my conscience. After all, they'd raised him, loved him longer than I ever had. I spent sleepless nights pacing through the rooms, retracing footsteps, every laughter-filled evening, every quiet morning spent in the kitchen with the sunlight spilling in like honey. Slowly, I realized that giving up the house felt like giving up Matt, as if I would be erasing a part of our story. I turned to friends for advice, and they all had differing opinions. Some painted me as the villain, others told me that I had every right to keep the place that held my memories. With their conflicting perspectives echoing in my head, I felt even more paralyzed. Who was I in all of this? After a few weeks, I agreed to meet with his parents, hoping for a solution. They arrived, looking weary and fragile, the lines of grief etched deeper in their faces, and we sat at his dining table, the same one where we'd shared countless meals. What started as an organized discussion devolved into tears, accusations, and desperate pleas. "This is our family home," they argued, while I felt my heart shatter, wondering if I was somehow the villain of this story. Each day brought fresh unease, and I complicated the matter by starting to dream of selling the house instead, a solution that felt easier, a way to turn our shared life into something tangible, something that could finally support me instead of haunt me. But would it be a betrayal? A few days after that confrontation, tangled in thoughts and half-formed plans, I found myself sitting on his old couch. Wrapped in his blanket, scrolling through my phone aimlessly. I stumbled upon a support forum where stories of similar heartbreak were shared, and as I read, I felt a wave of understanding wash over me. The threads resonated with tales of loss, love, and rebirth. It struck me that sometimes, betrayal comes not from holding on but from losing the courage to be honest. I penned a heartfelt letter to Matt's parents, pouring out my feelings and fears, explaining my desire to cherish his memory by keeping the house. I confess that I didn't want to erase his existence, it felt sacrilegious to me. Weeks passed, and after what felt like an eternity, they finally responded. In their reply, surprisingly gentle and understanding, they acknowledged my pain and agreed to a shared arrangement, allowing me to stay while also ensuring they could visit whenever they pleased. It was a relief, a patchwork solution that somehow felt right. I could take my time to heal, and in turn, they could reconnect with the son they had lost. Days turned to weeks as I settled into the fractured routine of grief and healing, small moments of joy seeping into my days. The last time I lit one of Matt's favorite candles, I didn't cry but smiled, remembering his laugh as it filled the room. Sure, the journey was still messy, and the scars of loss wouldn't fade quickly, but I had found a way to carry his memory forward, still not entirely sure whether I was the asshole, but at least I was no longer alone in my decision. Life, I learned, is not simple, and sometimes, dwelling in the gray is precisely where we find our way back to the light. It's funny how life has a way of tying everything up in knots before it unwinds just when you think you're at the end of your rope. After letting go of the weight of being the asshole back then, I immersed myself in the remembrance of Matt, letting those moments pull me toward healing. I decorate the small apartment we had together with things that reminded me of him, a collection of books he loved, a few of his favorite band posters that I regretfully took down but now hung again in proud defiance of how much I cherished those years together. It felt like a tribute to our time, despite the oft-discussed future that we'd never get to have. But there was still that looming question of Matt's house, the place where we shared both laughter and deep, loving conversations, and it weighed heavily on my mind after his parents reached out again. I remember exactly where I was when his mother called. I had been curled up on the couch, wrapped in a quilt that Matt had snagged from a thrift store because he loved the colors, bright orange patches that felt like the sun. Her voice was steady but trembled with an undercurrent of sadness as she filled me in on the details I'd already processed but hadn't fully faced. They wanted to discuss the house. It was a direct route back to the thoughts I tried to bury, that sense of obligation to return it to his family, to honor his memory alongside theirs, but it was also the thought of giving up a piece of my heart that kept me from saying yes. I had worried out loud to my friend Hannah about what this might mean. Would I be betraying our love? Would I be turning my back on the countless memories that literally echoed in those walls? Hannah had listened patiently over coffee, her blonde curls bouncing as she furrowed her brow. "You're not abandoning anything," she assured me, sipping her steaming latte, "you're just considering what Matty would have wanted." But the truth was, I didn't know what he would have wanted. We had never discussed what would happen if things went sideways. In my heart, I knew that building a life together in that space was an extension of our relationship, and I didn't want to relinquish it to the sharp edges of grief my memories sometimes morphed into. Days turned into weeks, each one brimming with contemplation. I thought of the countless summer nights we spent on the back porch, nursing our drinks, our dreams feeling limitless under a blanket of stars. But then, conflicting feelings began swirling in my mind. His parents deserved their piece of him too, he was their son after all. So there I was, caught in that relentless tide of internal debate, pacing the hardwood floor that hid the scuffs he had created by shuffling his feet, overthinking it, losing sleep while part of me fought against part of me while the other part stayed quiet, all in tandem. Eventually, in a moment steeped in courage derived from deep love, I called Matt's parents. My stomach flipped as I dialed their number. I could hear the hesitation in their voices when I explained how much I wanted to keep the house, thanking them for understanding even as they expressed disappointment. But to my surprise, they didn't lash out. They were gracious, even supportive, managing to communicate the essential truth, that love doesn't adhere to walls. It flows freely, molding the space within. They didn't ask for more, they just wanted to know I was okay, and somewhere in that conversation, I realized I was finally stepping into my own life, one part grieving and another part moving forward. A few months later, I found myself back at that house one bright Saturday morning, nostalgia flooding in as I prepared to host a small gathering for a few friends. As I laid out snacks and popped the cork on a bottle of wine, thoughts of Matt slipped in like a gentle breeze. I could almost hear him making jokes in the background, a playful reminder of how he used to turn even the most mundane moments into laughter. I stepped outside, leaning against the porch rail, watching the sunlight dance in the leaves overhead. A soft touch brushed the back of my mind, a whisper of reassurance that I was on the right path. By finally carving out my own space, I remembered us while allowing that to be an open door for new laughter, new memories, still honoring the love we had built. I might never fully know if I was right or wrong in my choice, but I finally felt on solid ground, free from the burden of guilt that had been my constant companion. The house was just the beginning. It wasn't the anchor that tied me to his memory but rather a vessel to traverse new journeys. As the laughter filled the air that evening, it dawned on me, the ghosts of our past can coexist beautifully, quietly guiding us, as long as we remember to live for the moments yet to come. Sitting in the midst of friends, I realized it was a world I hadn't fully immersed myself in until now. The chatter around the room was a comforting hum, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of glasses. I watched as Jenna, one of our closest friends, picked up the guitar Matt used to play. She strummed a few chords, glancing at me with that lopsided grin. "We should all sing one of Matt's favorites," she suggested. My heart flickered, half in joy and half in trepidation. It felt like an intrusion into my sacred memories, the kind you protect fiercely yet crave to share. But I nodded, the warmth of camaraderie coaxing me to lean into it. As the first notes of "Hey There Delilah" filled the room, I felt an unsettling twinge. It was his song, one that resonated with our long-distance relationship when he traveled for work, me lying on the couch listening to him through blurry phone lines. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the music to wrap around me like a gentle embrace. Instead of sorrow flooding my senses, I found fragments of joy rising within me, memories flashing like starlight. By the time Jenna finished the song, I was smiling, knee-deep in nostalgia yet buoyed by the laughter echoing around me. I looked around, and my friends were there, sharing in the moment, each of them carrying their own piece of Matt with them. Emily, with her wild spirit, was mixing cocktails in the kitchen, trying to recreate his infamous mojito. "Totally nailed it or totally failed it," she joked, and we erupted in laughter again. Yet, even amidst the warmth, I felt the shadows whispering uncertainty in my ear. The house, Matt's sanctuary, lingered at the edge of my mind. I was still torn over his parents' insistence on wanting it, the home that cradled our laughs and sheltered our dreams now looming as a point of contention. I recalled their faces, the raw pain in their eyes during the memorial, how they clung to relics of their son's life, each item a tangible piece of his existence. The texts continued, gently nudging at me, calling for decisions I hadn't yet made. That night, I slipped out to the balcony, the cool air prickling my skin. I leaned against the railing, staring at the stars, which felt so far away yet impossibly close. Did holding on to the house mean letting go or holding tight? There was a truth to letting it go that felt almost liberating, a part of me that knew Matt would want me to make memories in a space that reflected the life I was building. But there was another part, brittle and fearful, that worried letting go would mean losing him all over again. I scolded myself for these thoughts, It felt selfish to cling to a home when his parents were grieving in a way I might never fully grasp. After my friends left, I found myself wandering through the rooms, each space heavy with love and loss. I ran my fingers across the walls, the place filled with echoes of laughter, late-night talks, and raw vulnerability. This wasn't merely wood and nails, it was where I had grown as a person and where Matt and I had spun dreams together. It felt sacred. Eventually, I settled on the couch, wrapping a blanket tightly around me, half seeking comfort and half searching for clarity. In the moments that followed, I found myself reaching for my phone, not to text the parents, but to type out my thoughts. I contemplated how the house could be a kind of bridge, a way to honor Matt's legacy by hosting friends and writing and illuminating his memories. As I typed, it became clear, I didn't have to choose between keeping it and giving it away. Rather, what I truly needed was to transform it. A new purpose emerged from the grief. It could serve as a community space, a haven where Matt's spirit could linger in laughter and shared experiences. Finally, with a steady breath, I hit send on a message to his parents. I invited them to visit, expressing that while I understood their desire for the house, I envisioned a shared future where the space could be dedicated to honoring a life well lived. I knew they might not understand, and my heart raced at the thought of their reaction. My fingers trembled as I set my phone down, each heartbeat resounding in anticipation. I might still be navigating uncertainty, but perhaps, just maybe, I'd found a way through the haze. The stars twinkled above as I finally closed my eyes, letting the hum of memories blend seamlessly with the promise of new beginnings, holding tightly to the idea that love doesn't diminish, it can evolve, just as we do. It started as a normal Tuesday morning, the kind where you barely have time to sip your coffee before racing out the door for work. My job at a modest tech company in Seattle had become my routine. I was programmed to rise, work, and repeat, barely catching my breath in between. It was a dreary day, the clouds thick with the promise of rain, and I settled into my chair beneath the fluorescent lights, half listening to my coworkers' banter about the latest game release and plans for the weekend. That was when it happened, a sudden, loud buzz originating from all our screens, followed by the words flashing in bold, uppercase letters, "Hide." I looked around, stunned. My boss, usually the calm in any storm, froze mid-sentence, his eyes wide. A collective murmur spread like wildfire through the office as coworkers pulled out their phones only to find the same message plastered across social media, news apps, even our personal devices. Panic began to seep in, that creeping sense of dread rooted deep within my gut, as people scrambled to understand what was happening. I live alone, and my thoughts instantly drifted to my neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, an elderly woman who often relied on my borrowed sugar and occasional help with her garden. After a few moments of confusion, I found myself racing up the stairs, urgency propelling my movements. By the time I knocked on her door, I was shaking. I had already mentally rehearsed a myriad of possibilities. Was this a prank? A glitch? I heard shuffling from inside, followed by her croaky voice beckoning me to enter. Dropping my fear like a heavy coat on the rack, I stepped into her dimly lit apartment. The air was thick with the scent of lavender, a feeble attempt to mask the cooking smells from the night before. Mrs. Hargrove was seated on her threadbare couch, clutching her knitting needles like a lifeline. "Did you hear it, too?" she asked, eyes darting to the window as if the world outside would provide answers. We turned on the television, and the news broadcasters, usually so composed, were stumbling over their words, repeating the message, advising people to stay indoors, turn off their lights, and remain quiet. An inexplicable fear rippled through me. We sat together in comfortable silence, knitted tightly by the uncertainty of the moment, only the occasional crackle of the TV filling the void. My hand found hers, her warmth was a small comfort against the cold that crept into my bones. Hours passed, but the message remained, echoing in my mind, urging everyone to hide. I thought of how many times I'd taken her for granted, how our chats of mundane things, weather and gardening, had become my escape. We were two souls lost in an inexplicable moment, clinging to each other for reassurance even as her fear morphed into something deeper. As the sun began to set, shrouding the room in shadows, my phone buzzed insistently, notifications continued to pile up. I glanced at the screen. To my astonishment, the message had changed. It now read, "Doubt leads to vulnerability. Remain silent." With a chill, I looked at Mrs. Hargrove, whose hand was now tightening around mine, her eyes wide. "What does it mean?" I whispered, the question heavy with unsaid fears. She merely shrugged, her gaze flickering towards the flickering television, now filled with static. Then, just as quickly as the chaos had begun, It was gone. The screens turned blank, the world outside returned to its untroubled state, yet we sat, entangled in each other's worry, stunned silence stretching between us like an unbridgeable chasm. The next morning brought no clarity, we had not slept a wink, the tension of those hours weighing on our hearts like lead. As we emerged from our hiding, both bewildered and exhausted, I found the streets oddly sterile, the people moving through their routines with a peculiar detachment, almost as if they'd decided together to forget that one insidious message. My mind raced back to the uncertainty of that night, and a secret buried deep within me began to unfurl. The event had acted like a mirror, reflecting my own hidden fears, not for my life but for the connections I had taken so lightly. Mrs. Hargrove and I soon became inseparable. Our shared experience forged an unspoken pact, binding us together in our quiet sanctuary. As mundane as the days turned, I never went a day without checking in, ensuring she was well. It seemed that, in those moments of fear, I had found something truly precious, a friendship built from vulnerability, long evenings spent sipping tea and knitting, exchanging stories that reminded me of the beauty hidden within the everyday. And every now and then, when the shadows started closing in and the world felt too loud, I'd catch myself glancing at the windows, half wondering if the screens would ignite again, awakening the part of us that we'd left behind. Months passed, and just as I began to feel entirely at home in my newfound reality, I received a notification on my phone one evening, a message from somewhere unknown. Scrolling past the usual mundane alerts, my heart raced as my eyes locked onto the words flickering across the screen, "It's not over." In that moment, the cozy blanket of comfort that had enveloped my days peeled away, exposing me to the chill of uncertainty once more, and the thought echoed in my mind, what exactly was lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to strike? Now, it wasn't the screens I feared. It was my own heart, wondering if it had been bold enough to open itself up once again or if the next message would tell me to hide, again. The days that followed were punctuated by a strange mixture of paranoia and nostalgia. I often found myself staring at my phone, waiting for another message to flicker across my screen, as if it would somehow provide clarity in the whirlwind of confusion that had engulfed my thoughts. The sense of foreboding clung to me like a ghost, whispering reminders of the darkness that had nearly consumed me before, a darkness I thought I'd escaped. I had opened up to my closest friend, Lily, a few months back about my struggles, how a year-long battle with anxiety had left me feeling shackled within my own mind. It was thrilling to finally share my burden, yet with every confession, I felt that I've pushed her away, entangling her in my turmoil. She would often tell me it was brave to be vulnerable, yet my heart ached for the distance I imagined between us. Those late-night conversations over steaming cups of chamomile did fill the cracks in my soul, yet as dread seeped in again, I wondered if any breakthrough was truly positive. The messages hadn't just stirred fear, they unearthed old wounds, like a physician ripping off a bandage that had long since bonded with skin, leaving the tender flesh exposed and raw. Whenever Lily would check in, her texts were laced with a delicate balance of concern and cheerfulness that made my heart ache for the carefree days we once shared. Deep down, I wondered if I could muster the courage to tell her how the recent turn of events had reopened those emotions, and in a way, placed a wedge between us, a wedge invisible to her but painfully evident to me. One evening, just as the sky turned from a pale blue to a soft bruised purple, I found myself scrolling through old photos to stave off the rising anxiety. Images of laughter and impromptu adventures formed a tapestry of trust that felt almost foreign now. I stumbled upon a snapshot of us at the beach, Lily with her wild curls dancing in the wind, her laughter ringing like a melody that I could still hear faintly in the air. It was beautiful, and it temporarily dulled the chaotic thoughts racing in my mind. Yet, a sudden ping from my phone yanked me back to reality, and I instinctively glanced down to see that the ominous message had reappeared, just like it had before, "Hide." My breath hitched in my throat, and I felt a cold sweat prickle along my skin. In that moment, it wasn't the words that chilled me, it was the implication that whatever was sending these messages had returned, and this time, it was looking for more than just my attention. Feeling desperate, I called Lily, my heart pounding with a blend of dread and hope. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice a soft balm to my frayed nerves. I hesitated, the familiar anxiety clawing its way back, but I could feel her unwavering concern wrapping around me like a safety net. "No, it isn't," I finally admitted. And as I spilled my soul, describing the messages and the weight of my fear, a part of me feared she'd brush it off, that she'd think I was being melodramatic. Instead, she listened, unwavering. After a long silence, Lily replied softly, "We'll figure this out together. You're not alone in this." Just hearing her say that made a warmth bloom in my chest. Perhaps I had misjudged our connection, believing the heaviness in my heart had dimmed my light enough to distance us. But there. She was, steadfast and true, reminding me that not all shadows had to be faced alone. Over the next few days, we navigated this precarious situation together. We dived into threads of conversation, piecing together the cryptic messages that seemed to proliferate overnight. Lily encouraged me to document each one, treating them as clues in a puzzle. As we turned our fears into a project, our bond grew stronger. We spent nights on the phone, diving into the mystery, allowing it to infuse a sense of purpose that we both desperately craved. And then, one fateful night, as I lay in bed flipping through the accumulated screenshots, ready to drift into sleep, something unprecedented happened. My screen lit up, and the words that gripped my heart broke like the dawn cracking through the dark: hide. But not from what you think. Confusion swirled through me, the word but felt like a key unlocking something deeper. Hiding from what? Suddenly the messages felt less like threats and more like a guiding hand, steering me towards something unknown. As I filled with determination, I snapped a photo of the screen and sent it to Lily, who replied almost instantly, fired with excitement rather than fear. It's a clue. We need to figure out what this means. There was a long pause on my end as I considered the implications. What if this was the turning point? What if whatever darkness had clung to me now had turned itself into a riddle, daring us to explore rather than cower? As we brainstormed possible meanings, an idea began to take shape in my mind, a quirky venture through local urban legends, a path that could lead to scattered pieces of the puzzle hidden throughout our town. The notion that the world wasn't just void of shadows, but also alive with the stories of others, breathed a sense of exhilaration into my soul. We had started something larger than ourselves, twisting dread into a shared adventure and recalibrating our relationship with each word we scrawled over old maps, feeling like true detectives across a mosaic of vibrant stories waiting to be unveiled. Perhaps I was slowly embracing the shadows, not as a harbinger of despair, but as a canvas upon which new experiences could be painted. The messages weren't just warnings, at least, not entirely. They became gateways to an old friend and a reminder that even when darkness loomed, there was light to be found in unity, adventure, and courage. And as I shut my eyes that night, I held onto that thought, the thrill of the unknown blossoming within me, not as a threat but as an invitation, a chance to rewrite our story together, one hidden message at a time. The next morning greeted me with a hesitant light creeping through the curtains, softening the edges of the trepidation still clinging to me like a heavy mist. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, half expecting another cryptic message waiting for me, but this time there was nothing, just the dull maintenance of my usual notifications. The absence of alert from the screens around me felt oddly louder than any of the messages I had previously seen. As my caffeine-fueled thoughts began to swirl, I considered how I would address Lucy. She had been a pillar of strength throughout this bizarre ordeal, sharing her own fears and curiosities with me over late-night cups of tea. Together, we had spent countless hours unraveling the mysteries woven into those chilling notifications, our conversations bridging the gap between the surreal and the rational. It's not over, I whispered to myself, a confession of my lingering anxieties, as I prepared to head to her apartment for our usual Saturday brunch ritual. The sun had risen to its rightful place in the sky, but a nagging sense of foreboding remained, reminding me that beneath the tranquil surface, there was an unsettling current waiting just to be recognized. When I arrived, Lucy was already seated at the table, her fingers wrapped around a steaming mug as she gazed out at the colorful leaves dancing in the autumn breeze. There was a look of pensive serenity on her face, and for the briefest moment, I wished I could share that calmness. But as I slid into the chair across from her, I could feel the weight of the past few days clash against the warmth of her smile. "Hey, you," she said, her voice bright, "I was just thinking about how wild it was that we both got the same notification last night. Did you freak out too?" A laugh bubbled up from my throat that was more nervous than amused, yet I could see the sincerity in her eyes. "It's crazy, right? I mean, not just what it said, but how it makes you feel, like we're being roped into something much bigger than ourselves," I replied, glimpsing the unease that lurked behind her smile. With each shared moment, each comforting caress of friendship, I began to lose some of the tension that had tightened its grip on my chest. Over pancakes drizzled in syrup and steaming cups of tea, we ventured deeper into discussions about the messages, what they could possibly mean and how they seemed to weave in and out of our lives, like a narrative tether tying us both to something greater. The hours rolled by, merging laughter with serious contemplations, as we mapped out a series of possibilities. By the time we finished our brunch, a plan had begun to form, an exploration we were both willing to embark on. We would confront this strange phenomenon together, stepping beyond the comfort of our homes into the realm of the unknown, equipped only with our wits, a shared sense of adventure, and the lingering warmth of our connection. In the days that followed, we gathered intel, combed through our social media feeds for clues, and reached out to others who had experienced similar eerie messages, weaving a network of support that spanned far wider than we anticipated. Then one evening, as twilight wrapped the world in a shimmering whiff of mystery, we received a different kind of message. This one appeared on our phones with an urgency that pulled at the beads of fear and excitement strung within us. Find the light. My heart raced at the implications. What did it mean, finding light? Was it a physical location or a metaphorical endeavor? Both Lucy and I felt the thrill of plunging into uncharted territory, an adventure where we would become co-authors of the story the universe had chosen to share with us. We centralized our efforts to the town's old library, a labyrinth of dusty tomes and forgotten relics that had fostered many youthful imaginations. There, beneath the worn shelves, countless lives had intersected with stories that lingered in the margins, a serene backdrop for our quest. I wandered into the musty aisles brimming with nostalgia, trying to interpret the message as I climbed the well-worn wooden stepladder toward a collection of novels hidden high above the lesser-explored stacks. It was a slow and meaningful search, our hearts synchronized, tinged with an understanding that what we sought wasn't just an answer but a piece of ourselves amidst the chaos. It was Lucy who discovered it first, a small brass lamp hidden behind a thick volume of poetry, retreating silently from the world but undeniably beckoning us to turn it on. As the electricity coursed through its threads, a warm golden hue expelled shadows from the corners of the library, melting them away like whispers in the night. And it was in that light, amidst the stacks surrounding us like an embrace, that we felt a pulse of reassurance thrumming through our hearts. The messages had never been solely about warnings or reminders to hide, they had been guiding us toward the light, the very essence of connection, friendship, and courage to face whatever lay ahead. As I stood there, my fears unfurling like dried leaves in the breeze, I turned to Lucy, whose smile sparkled brighter than any flickering screen. We were no longer simply ghostly passengers caught in the web of fear, we had woven ourselves into a vibrant tapestry of camaraderie, ready to face whatever mysteries awaited us. The realization struck me profoundly, and as I closed my eyes in gratitude for her presence, I understood that this was just the beginning of a new adventure, a chance to embrace the unknown together, not as separate entities but as two hearts, one journey, united under the gentle warmth of the light we had found. In the days that followed, the world outside continued its rhythm, blissfully unaware of the small spark of light we had ignited in our own lives. I often felt the thrill of messages flickering across screens, but now they were no longer sentences of fear. Instead, they transformed into whispers of adventure, encouraging exploration anew. Perhaps the forthcoming challenges would come with shadows, but armed with the knowledge that even darkness could illuminate paths yet unknown, I felt more than ready. And with Lucy beside me, I realized we were not merely searching for answers. We were crafting a narrative of resilience and hope, one that welcomed and embraced the shadows, because sometimes, it was within those dark corners that the flickers of light just waited to be found. As I nestled down on that soothing evening, the comfort of the day wrapping around me like a tender embrace, my heart no longer raced with uncertainty. Instead, it thrummed steadily in a newfound harmony, a gentle cadence whispering that whatever came next would be worth every step taken. And perhaps, just perhaps, the next message would not carry an admonition to hide but an invitation to explore, breathe, and embrace this beautiful tapestry of existence we continued to weave together. I never thought a water fountain could become a point of contention, but here I am, sitting at my kitchen table, staring out at the little slice of paradise my backyard has become. When I bought my house 4 years ago, it came with an abundance of quirks, most of them charming, but there was this one thing that caught my eye immediately, a dilapidated stone fountain, tucked away beneath a tangle of vines and weeds. At first, it seemed like yet another problem to tackle among the many renovations I had lined up. But as I stripped away the layers of neglect, I found something beautiful beneath, the intricate carvings that wove into the stonework, the delightful gurgle of water once I got it running again. It became the heart of my outdoor space, a sanctuary where I could escape after long days of work. Friends and family loved it, and I cherished the evenings spent sipping wine on my patio, the sound of water filling the air. It was my little oasis, and I wasn't about to let go of it easily. But then my neighbor, Lisa, moved in next door, and that's when everything unraveled. She was nice enough at first, friendly, always waving, but there was something about her demeanor that felt off when she mentioned the fountain. One afternoon, She brought over a plate of cookies and casually asked if I'd ever considered giving the fountain to her. "It would really complete my garden," she said, her eyes sparkling with what I could only assume was enthusiasm. I was taken aback, a little incredulous, as I chuckled and politely declined, thinking she was joking. But she wasn't, and from that day forward, her comments turned into subtle hints, and those hints became outright requests. "Think about how much better it would look in my yard," she'd say, and I felt a knot in my stomach every time. I was torn. It was just a fountain, after all, but it was my fountain, a part of my home and heart. Each request felt increasingly invasive, as though she was infringing on something very personal to me. I contemplated various ways to approach her, to explain that it wasn't just about the fountain itself, but about the memories it represented, the peace it brought me after some tumultuous times in my life. Then one evening, she blatantly asked me, "Are you really going to hold on to that fountain forever? It's just sitting there gathering dust." Her words felt like a slap. I could feel my anger bubbling up, fueled by her brazen disregard for my feelings. I tried to explain how much it meant to me, how it represented a fresh start after a tough chapter, but she interrupted, insisting, "You can get another one. It's not like you can keep it forever." We exchanged words, and for the first time, I let her see the fierce protectiveness I had for the fountain, my voice trembling as I said, "I don't want to part with it." She rolled her eyes, and I knew then that we were no longer just neighbors, we were adversaries. Days passed where I felt a heavy weight on my chest whenever I spotted her in her yard. I began to feel self-conscious, paranoid even. Would she think about it every time she looked at her garden? Would my unwillingness to part with a piece of stone ruin the neighborhood peace? I couldn't shake the guilt, but I also couldn't give in. That fountain had become a symbol for me, and letting go would feel like surrendering a piece of myself. I eventually confided in a few friends, and to my surprise, they rallied behind me, urging me to stand my ground. Eventually, after much back and forth, I sat down with her one afternoon, my heart pounding, and reiterated my refusal. "You can't just take what isn't yours," I said, and to my shock, she seemed to soften. She admitted that she was frustrated she didn't have a fountain of her own, and in that moment, I actually felt a twinge of empathy. It wasn't just about the fountain for her, it was probably about wanting something beautiful to make her feel at home too. We ended that conversation on a truce of sorts, more respectful but still a little strained. All these months later, I still feel the weight of that moment, of the decision I made, but I also see the value in what I chose. Preserving my sanctuary was about safeguarding my peace. I found solace in the knowledge that home is not just about the physical space, but the emotions tied to it. It's now been a year since that awkward confrontation, and Lisa and I have made an effort to bridge the gap. We wave at each other, and I even invited her over for coffee a few times. I can't say we'll ever be best friends, but at least we're civil. The fountain still bubbles in my yard, a testament to my journey, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, and a gentle whisper that sometimes, it's okay to take up space and claim what is yours. As I sit on the patio, the sun spilling warm rays over our little backyard oasis, I watch the water fountain sparkle in the late afternoon light. It bubbles softly, sending little ripples across the surface of the birdbath beneath it, where cheerful robins dip in for brief splashes. I still remember the day Lisa had come over out of the blue, her voice shaky as she demanded I give it back, her eyes wide with disbelief at my firm refusal. It's funny how just a year can change so much. Back then, I felt a cocktail of surprise and frustration at her abruptness, but now, there's a sense of calm, almost acceptance, in our relationship. Sure, we weren't chatting about the favorite shade of lipstick or surviving the latest Netflix series over coffee, but a nod and a wave held their own kind of conversation, didn't they? It felt good to reclaim that space, not just in my yard, but in my life. I've learned to appreciate that sometimes, boundaries are not just about lines drawn in the sand, they're about personal growth and understanding what you deserve. You know, the fountain, once an unwanted artifact in our home, morphed into a symbol of resilience. I even caught myself thinking about how Lisa had painted her life in a stark black and white, while mine gradually became a watercolor, soft and blending, colorful and hopeful. One afternoon, after inviting her over for coffee again, I decided to take a chance. As Lisa sipped her latte and glanced curiously at the bubbling fountain, I mentioned how I'd been considering adding some pebbles around the base, maybe even a few plants to create a more inviting atmosphere. She hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly, and I could almost see her weighing her words, like she was taking measured steps into a land that felt unfamiliar. "You know," she said cautiously, "I always thought that fountain had a wrong place in our neighborhood, but now I see it fits." Her voice trailed off, and a hint of a smile danced on her lips. At that moment, it struck me how layered our emotions had been, how much history nestled beneath the surface of our seemingly mundane interactions. It felt like a truce, a mutual recognition that our choices shaped our spaces, but they didn't have to define us entirely. After that coffee, I found myself reflecting on our lives more deeply. Maybe we were more alike than different, two women figuring out our place in this world, both grappling with our own battles but learning to navigate the complexities of adult relationships. Every time I looked at the fountain, it reminded me of the bubbling emotions we often kept bottled inside, just waiting for a spark to bring them back to life. Season by season, as the fountain continued to flow and thrive, I planted flowers around it, and they blossomed, matching the vibrant changes occurring in my life. They seemed to invite bees and butterflies to our little corner of the world, echoing the beauty of growth and coexistence. Then one afternoon, while arranging a cluster of marigolds around the edge, I noticed Lisa standing by the fence, watching me. Unlike before, her expression was softer, more open. "I was just admiring your flowers," she called out, and for a moment, I paused, feeling a thread of connection weave silently through the air. "Thanks. Want to help?" I blurted out, a mix of unexpected eagerness and genuine hope pouring out. To my surprise, she hopped over without hesitation and spent a couple of hours digging in the dirt, laughter spilling from us in easy waves as we swapped stories about everything from home projects to quirky family traditions. I don't know if that afternoon changed everything, but it certainly shifted the momentum between us. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that preserving space, and fighting for it, can lead to unexpected connections. The fountain, once a source of tension, turned into a centerpiece of friendship, an unlikely bond flowing gracefully through the currents of our lives. And as those blooms opened under the sun, I realized that sometimes, it's not just about claiming what's rightfully yours, but also about sharing the beauty in your life with others, creating something larger than both of you. So here I sit, cup of tea in hand, watching a new chapter unfold, one that flows as effortlessly as the water in that soft, bubbling fountain. The sun hung low in the sky, pooling golden light in my backyard, illuminating the gentle dance of leaves stirred by a light breeze. As I sat with my cup of tea, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed. The fountain, with its rhythmic bubbling, seemed almost alive, gurgling its secrets while I reflected on this past year. Lisa's visits had become frequent, and in a way, they felt like nurturing the roots of a friendship that I hadn't seen coming. Funny how a piece of stone and water could forge a connection between two people who had once viewed each other as enemies. I often marveled at how we would sit on my patio, talking over the sound of that bubbling fountain while the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass. Initially, our conversations danced around pleasantries, but gradually they deepened, sharing stories about our childhoods, our aspirations, and even our fears. I learned that Lisa had spent years feeling like an outsider, displaced from her cherished home that had been sold to its current landlord, and how she often wished she could reclaim even just a small piece of it. That, perhaps, was her own fight for space, one she had focused on before my waterfall had come into the picture. Some days, in the soft glow of twilight, I could sense her longing as she gazed at the fountain, as if it were a bridge to a past she missed. "It really is such a beautiful feature," she would say, her voice low and contemplative. "I remember how it used to be in my parents' yard. Just a small, humble pot with a bit of trickling water, but it sparked so many happy gatherings." Each of her memories wove a thread between us, connecting our experiences in unexpected ways. We grew closer, too, when we would host neighborhood gatherings, allowing others to see our evolving friendship. The fountain stood as a testament to our ability to create something positive from old grudges. I remember the day when the first blush of spring arrived, and we teamed up to organize a small block party. As laughter filled the air and children played by the fountain, I caught a glimpse of Lisa's smile, unrestrained and genuine. It was as though she had set down the burdens of comparison and jealousy. And honestly, I felt lighter too. The bitterness I had once clung to had slipped away, replaced by a sense of shared joy. But like a breeze that turned suddenly, our connection met a momentary pause. One day, Lisa arrived with a different energy about her. There was a weight in her smile, a melancholic shadow behind her eyes. "I may have to move," she said, sitting down at the edge of my patio. The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. After months of building something I thought was strong and lasting, my heart sank. "My job is relocating me. I'm going to have to leave the neighborhood in a few weeks." For a moment, everything felt surreal. I resisted the urge to fold in on myself, to protect my heart from the thought of losing this friendship we had carefully nurtured. Is there any way to stay? I blurted out, wishing I could teleport her into staying just a little longer. But she shook her head with a gentle sadness, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. I wish. I'll miss our tea times, and I'll miss the fountain in your yard, too. Those words struck me. It was more than just a fountain, it represented our journey together, the growth we nurtured in one another through shared laughter and vulnerability. I realized then that preserving space isn't just a matter of claiming something physical, it's also about creating emotional ties and legacy in our lives. I took a breath and cleared my throat. If you have to move, you have to move. But how about instead of saying goodbye, we make this an adventure? Let's start planning some visits, and I'll send you updates about the fountain, what blossoms, what birds arrive, and who visits. It can be our place still. A smile broke through her somber demeanor, and just like that, our moment of uncertainty transformed. You promise? She asked, her eyes sparkling with hope. I want to hear all the stories. We both laughed, and I could feel the air lightening around us. It was a conversation that echoed what I had learned, while standing your ground is important, allowing yourself the flexibility to share experiences and memories with others can lead to bonds that withstand distance. As the last embers of daylight faded, we sat together in comfortable silence. Each bubble of the fountain seemed to whisper promises of continuity. I stared out at the sparkling water, realizing that this moment, though bittersweet, would not mark the end but rather a new chapter, one that could flow just as effortlessly as the water coursing through our fountain. And as I watched her leave that evening, the warm glow of a blossoming friendship buzzed around me like the remnants of sunlight. Even if space would separate us, the connection we forged would carry on, a reassuring flow that time would not dim.